Welcome, dear listener, to The Sleepy Scientist. Whether you're tucked under a mountain of blankets, watching shadows dance on the ceiling, or letting your mind drift like a jellyfish in the ocean of night, you're in the right place. Tonight's adventure is filled with oddities, quirks, and some of the most bizarre adaptations the natural world has ever come up with. We're talking about animals so strange they make fiction look lazy. Now, just between us, there's always a fine line with these videos. I sincerely hope this one doesn't end up being too fascinating. After all, you're probably here to wind down. But if you do find yourself wide-eyed at 3 a.m. wondering why a shrimp can punch faster than a bullet, or how a jellyfish might live forever, well, at least you'll come out of it a little smarter. If you enjoy wandering through the weirder corners of nature with me, please consider leaving a like or tapping that little subscribe button. It's a small thing that means a lot. I'd also love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Whether it's just past sunset or the birds are starting to chirp, I'm glad you're here. So let's dim the lights in our minds, take a slow breath, and begin our journey into the wonderfully weird world of animal oddities. Strange noses, glassy skin, immortal bodies. Nature's imagination is boundless, and tonight we're just getting started. And just a gentle reminder, while we'll be exploring some truly fascinating biological features and adaptations, none of this is medical advice. Please leave the science experiments to the professionals and the naked mole rats. Imagine, if you will, a creature that looks like a smiling little salamander with a feather boa stuck to its head, forever frozen in a state of youthful charm. That's not the premise of a whimsical children's book. It's a real animal called the axolotl. Native to the ancient lakes of Mexico, particularly Lake Xochimilco, this amphibian defies many of the rules we expect animals to follow. It doesn't grow up in the usual sense. It regenerates body parts like it's got a spare parts warehouse, and it spends its entire life underwater despite being technically a land-capable species. The axolotl is what happens when evolution decides, you know what, let's just keep things weird. Let's begin with the trait that makes the axolotl truly iconic, neoteny. This is the fancy biological term for retaining juvenile characteristics into adulthood. Most amphibians go through a process called metamorphosis. Think of a tadpole turning into a frog, losing its tail, growing legs, and swapping gills for lungs. But the axolotl, it skips that final stage entirely. It stays in its larval form for life, keeping its fluffy gill stalks, aquatic lifestyle, and youthful grin. It's like Peter Pan, but with more slime and a talent for regrowing limbs. Now, you might wonder, why would an animal refuse to grow up? Doesn't nature usually push creatures toward maturity for survival and reproduction? In the axolotl's case, this arrested development seems to be an advantage. By staying in the water and skipping the whole land-hopping stage, the axolotl avoids many of the dangers that face its amphibian cousins. Land can be unpredictable. Dry spells, predators, and lack of food can make it a risky place to be. But the lake? For the axolotl, that's a buffet with relatively few natural threats. Axolotls are part of the salamander family, but they're very different from most of their cousins. Most salamanders go through metamorphosis and live partly on land. The axolotl, however, remains fully aquatic. It breathes primarily through its external gills, those beautiful frilly structures on either side of its head that look like underwater ferns. These gills wave gently in the water, creating a kind of halo effect, and they're incredibly efficient at extracting oxygen. Interestingly, axolotls do have lungs and can surface to breathe air when necessary. In fact, they have 3 ways of breathing: through their gills, through their lungs, and even through their skin, which is permeable to gases. That's right, this animal is a breathing Swiss Army knife. But perhaps what really makes the axolotl a superstar in the scientific world is its astounding ability to regenerate. While some animals can regrow a tail or maybe a toe, the axolotl takes regeneration to superhero levels. It can regrow entire limbs, parts of its heart, lungs, spinal cord, and even sections of its brain. And here's the kicker, it does this without scarring. When an axolotl loses a limb, it doesn't just grow back a rough approximation. It reconstructs the entire structure, nerves and all, to nearly perfect condition. Scientists have been studying axolotls for decades to understand how they manage such a feat, hoping to unlock secrets that might one day help human medicine. The process begins with the formation of a special group of cells at the injury site, called a blastema. These cells are pluripotent, meaning they can become almost any type of cell the body needs. The blastema acts like a blueprint, guiding the regrowth process to ensure everything goes back exactly where it should. It's not a quick fix, it can take weeks, but the results are astonishing. It's as if the axolotl keeps a copy of its own construction manual and isn't afraid to use it. You might be wondering, if this creature is so remarkable, how is it doing in the wild? Unfortunately, the answer is not very well. Despite its almost magical biology, the axolotl is critically endangered in its natural habitat. Lake Xochimilco has been heavily affected by urban development, pollution, and the introduction of invasive species like tilapia and carp, which compete with the axolotl for food and sometimes eat their eggs. Today, axolotls are far more common in laboratory tanks and aquariums than in the wild waters of Mexico. Fortunately, they breed quite readily in captivity, which has helped scientists study them extensively and has led to a rise in public awareness. Efforts are also underway to restore parts of their natural habitat, including floating gardens known as chinampas, which provide shelter and breeding grounds in Xochimilco's canals. Conservationists are hoping that with enough support the axolotl can stage a comeback, not just as a pet or a lab specimen, but as a thriving wild species once more. There's also something uniquely charming about the axolotl's expression. It's not just anthropomorphism. Their facial structure gives them a permanent gentle smile that people can't help but find endearing. This has made them internet darlings, starring in memes, plush toys, and even video games. But behind that adorable smile lies a complex and deeply important biological story. Genetically, the axolotl is a bit of a beast. Its genome is enormous, about 10 times the size of the human genome. This is partly because of the sheer volume of repetitive DNA sequences, and while size doesn't necessarily equal complexity, it does present both challenges and opportunities for geneticists. Unlocking the axolotl's code might one day provide insight into how we could promote healing in human tissues, treat degenerative diseases, or even better understand cancer resistance mechanisms. Speaking of labs, axolotls have been studied since the 19th century. In fact, all the lab axolotls around the world are believed to have descended from just a few individuals that were shipped to Paris in the 1800s. These animals have since become a staple in developmental biology research, helping scientists explore how organs form, how nerves connect, and how regeneration might be triggered. Yet despite all their scientific importance, axolotls remain wonderfully odd and deeply peaceful creatures. They float serenely in their tanks, occasionally giving a lazy flick of their tail or gently paddling their limbs. Their eyes, which lack eyelids, give them a kind of perpetually wide-eyed innocence, and their behaviour is just as calm. They're not aggressive, they don't chase prey with vigour. Instead, they wait patiently for food to come their way, often sucking it in with a sudden vacuum-like motion of their mouth. Their diet is simple and unhurried. Worms, small insects, crustaceans. They're not picky, and they're not in a rush. In a way, the axolotl embodies a kind of stillness that's rare in the animal world. It's as if they've found the perfect pace of life and decided to stick with it. Of course, not all axolotls stay in their larval form. In rare cases, usually triggered by hormone injections in labs or extreme environmental stress, they can undergo metamorphosis and become more like a traditional salamander complete with lungs and land legs. But this process is risky and often shortens their lifespan. For the most part, axolotls are quite content staying exactly as they are, young at heart and gilled for life. There's something profoundly soothing about the axolotl's world, It's a reminder that nature doesn't always follow a straight line. Sometimes it loops back, pauses, or even skips a few steps entirely, and in doing so, it creates something beautiful and bizarre. The axolotl, with its feathery gills and eternal youth, is proof that even in a world filled with roaring predators and soaring hunters, there is space for quiet miracles, floating just beneath the surface, smiling gently, and waiting patiently in the calm. If someone described an animal to you as having the bill of a duck, the tail of a beaver, the feet of an otter, the fur of a mole, and a venomous spur on its ankle, you'd probably assume they were reading a particularly chaotic round of evolutionary mad libs. But this creature is no myth. It's very real, very alive, and it's called the platypus. Native to Australia and utterly baffling to early European scientists, the platypus is one of the most peculiar animals ever discovered. When a specimen was first sent to England in the late 18th century, some naturalists were convinced it was an elaborate hoax, stitched together from parts of several animals like some Frankenstein taxidermy project. They even tried to find the stitches. But no, the platypus is not a prank. It's an evolutionary original, marching to the beat of its own biological drum. It belongs to an exclusive club known as the monotremes, egg-laying mammals, which includes only 5 species on Earth. The other 4 are echidnas, also native to Australia and New Guinea. While the echidna looks like a hedgehog with an identity crisis, the platypus is in a league all its own. Let's begin with the bill. At first glance, it does resemble that of a duck, broad, flat, and a bit comical. But this is no simple beak. The platypus bill is a highly sophisticated sensory organ, packed with electroreceptors. These allow the platypus to detect the tiny electric fields generated by the muscle contractions of prey. Imagine trying to catch your dinner with your eyes closed, underwater, in pitch blackness. That's how the platypus hunts, and it's incredibly good at it. In fact, when diving for food, the platypus closes its eyes, ears, and nostrils, essentially shutting off 3 of the 5 senses we humans tend to rely on most. Instead, it sweeps its bill side to side as it moves along the riverbed, picking up subtle electrical cues from worms, insects, and small crustaceans hiding in the mud. It's like having a built-in radar system in your face. And speaking of faces, the bill isn't actually hard like a duck's. It's soft and leathery, more like the pad of a dog's nose, and highly sensitive. Scientists have found that the platypus can detect electrical signals as faint as a few millionths of a volt. That's comparable to sensing the electricity from a living battery the size of a mosquito. It's one of the most precise biological sensors in the animal kingdom. Now onto the feet. The platypus has webbed feet, which makes perfect sense given its aquatic lifestyle. When swimming, it uses its front feet for propulsion and steers with the back ones, plus a bit of help from that broad, flat tail. On land, the webbing retracts, exposing claws that help with digging. This dual-function adaptation lets the platypus move comfortably through both water and soil, despite being far more graceful in the former. That tail isn't just for steering either. It acts as a fat storage unit, a sort of biological pantry. In times of scarcity, the platypus can draw on this reserve to keep going. The tail is also quite strong and can help pack soil when the animal is digging out its burrow, which is typically located along riverbanks and can stretch for several meters underground. The burrow itself is another marvel. The female platypus constructs a nesting chamber at the end of a tunnel, often with a plug of mud and debris to seal it off. She lines the chamber with leaves and grass and lays her eggs, usually 1 to 3 of them, in a soft little nest. Yes, you heard that right. She lays eggs. Despite being a mammal, the platypus reproduces in a style more commonly associated with birds and reptiles. The eggs are leathery rather than hard-shelled, much like those of a reptile, and the mother incubates them by curling around them tightly. After about 10 days, the eggs hatch, and the young emerge, blind, hairless, and helpless. Here's where things get even weirder. The platypus doesn't have nipples. Instead, it secretes milk through specialized pores in the skin, and the milk pools on the mother's abdomen. The babies then lap it up, sort of like licking condensed milk from a patch of fur. It's not elegant, but it works. Males, however, are equipped with a feature that's a bit more alarming: venom. On each hind leg, the male platypus has a spur connected to a venom gland. During the breeding season, these glands ramp up production, and the venom can be delivered in a swift kick. It's not deadly to humans, but it's extremely painful, causing swelling, tissue damage, and even a form of hyperalgesia, which is a heightened sensitivity to pain that can last for weeks or even months. Scientists believe this venom is used primarily in competition with other males over territory or mating rights. In the wild, male platypuses are usually solitary and quite territorial, so having a natural syringe strapped to your ankle can come in handy when you're trying to keep rivals at bay. Interestingly, the venom is chemically complex, containing proteins found in snake venom, as well as others unique to the platypus. All of this makes the platypus something of an evolutionary outlier. It doesn't fit neatly into the categories we like to use. Mammal? Yes, but it lays eggs. Aquatic? Yes, but it spends a significant amount of time on land. Cute and fuzzy, yes, but it can inject you with pain-inducing venom. It's like evolution went shopping for traits at several different stores and decided, why not all of the above? Despite their strange biology, platypuses are relatively shy and elusive animals. They prefer calm, freshwater environments like streams, rivers and ponds, where they forage for food mostly at dawn and dusk. This twilight activity makes them crepuscular, one of those lovely scientific terms that means most active when the light is soft. When not hunting, they spend time in their burrows, grooming their thick waterproof fur or resting. That fur, by the way, is another marvel. It's incredibly dense, more than 800 hairs per square millimetre. For comparison, humans have about 200 hairs per square inch on their heads. This dense coat keeps the platypus warm even in chilly mountain streams and helps it float by trapping tiny air bubbles. Although platypuses are not considered endangered, they are classified as near threatened due to habitat destruction, water pollution, and changes in river systems caused by agriculture and development. Climate change, too, poses a risk, as it affects water flow and the delicate ecosystems platypuses rely on. Conservation efforts are underway, particularly in Australia, to protect their habitats and monitor population trends. Because these creatures are elusive and often hard to spot, tracking their numbers accurately can be a challenge. In recent years, there's been a growing movement in Australia to not just preserve platypus habitats, but to celebrate them culturally as well. They're featured on coins, in children's books, and even as mascots. Perhaps most famously, one animated version wears a fedora and fights crime, but the real animal is even more fascinating than fiction. Genetic studies have also revealed just how unique the platypus truly is. When scientists sequenced its genome in the early 2000s, they found a mix of traits shared with birds, reptiles, and mammals. It has 10 sex chromosomes instead of the usual 2, shares genes with reptiles for egg production, and still retains features from some of the earliest mammals that ever walked the earth. It's a living relic, a peek into a deep evolutionary past that somehow managed to survive into the modern age. In a world increasingly driven by order and categorization, the platypus stands as a reminder that nature doesn't always play by the rules. It's strange, it's surprising, and it's absolutely real. A creature that challenges what it means to be a mammal, and in doing so expands our understanding of biology itself. For all its oddities, the platypus leads a rather peaceful life. It glides through water with a gentle grace, hunts in silence, and prefers solitude to spectacle. But its presence in the wild, quiet and rare, tells a story of resilience. It reminds us that evolution isn't always about being the fastest or fiercest. It can also be about adapting in such a unique way that no one else even tries to compete with you. The platypus doesn't just break the mold, it makes you question why there was a mold in the first place. Imagine being able to hit the reset button on your entire body, not just a nap or a spa day, but an actual biological do-over. Picture yourself aging a bit, getting tired, maybe facing a bit of cellular wear and tear, and then, rather than continuing to decline, your body simply decides, let's go back to the beginning, and transforms itself into a fresh, youthful version. For humans, this would be the stuff of science fiction, but for a tiny jellyfish drifting through the oceans, it's just another Tuesday. Meet Turritopsis dohrnii, often referred to as the immortal jellyfish. It's no larger than your pinky nail, completely transparent, and almost unnoticeable as it floats gently in warm and temperate ocean waters around the world. But behind that humble appearance lies a biological trick so extraordinary, it has earned this creature a kind of mythical status in the scientific world. The magic begins with the jellyfish's life cycle. Most jellyfish, like butterflies or frogs, go through a series of distinct stages. They begin life as larvae called planulae, which settle onto a surface and develop into polyps, tiny stalk-like structures that resemble sea anemones. These polyps can then asexually produce free-swimming jellyfish known as medusae, the form most people recognise, with their bell-shaped bodies and trailing tentacles. Normally that's the end of the line. The medusa matures, reproduces, and eventually dies, having completed its one-way journey through the cycle of life. But Turritopsis dohrnii doesn't always follow that script. When faced with injury, starvation, or other stress, this jellyfish can revert, and not just partially. It can transform its mature medusa body back into a polyp. It's as if a butterfly, when faced with a cold snap, could curl up and return to being a caterpillar. This reverse development process is called transdifferentiation, and it's something most animals simply cannot do. Cells in the medusa's body change from one type into another, essentially reprogramming themselves. Muscle cells might become nerve cells. Digestive tissues might become part of a polyp's stalk. It's a full biological regression, and it can be repeated over and over again. In theory, this means the jellyfish could bypass death indefinitely, unless, of course, it's eaten, infected, or otherwise destroyed. This potential for immortality has made Turritopsis dohrnii a fascinating subject of study. Scientists are eager to understand how the transdifferentiation process works on a molecular level. Could this be the key to unlocking regenerative medicine? Could it help in treating age-related diseases? As of now, we're still in the early stages of that research, but even the possibility is enough to capture the imagination. Despite all this intrigue, the immortal jellyfish is not rare or flamboyant. It doesn't glow with bioluminescence, nor does it wield any venomous stingers that pose a threat to humans. It drifts along almost invisibly in warm coastal waters, especially in the Mediterranean Sea, the waters off Japan, and parts of the Caribbean. They're often overlooked by divers and researchers alike, simply because of their size and transparency. Their bodies are composed of about 95% water, with a delicate gelatinous consistency that would disintegrate under too much handling. The bell, or dome, of the jellyfish measures just a few millimeters in diameter. Underneath, a fringe of tentacles trails along, and at the center lies a bright red stomach, one of the few features that makes them visually distinct under a microscope. Despite their nickname, these jellyfish are not truly immortal in the superhero sense. They can still die, especially in the wild where life is anything but safe. Predators, disease, pollution, and changes in temperature or salinity can all bring their journey to an end. But their ability to reverse aging is unparalleled in the animal kingdom, and it provides a glimpse into a mechanism of resilience that seems to break the usual biological rules. What's especially curious is that the process of reverting to a polyp doesn't just erase physical aging, it also rewinds cellular aging. The jellyfish doesn't just look young again. On a cellular level, it is young again. Telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes that usually shorten with age, appear to be maintained or even lengthened in the process. That's like turning back your DNA's biological clock, something researchers around the world are deeply interested in. Studying Turritopsis dohrnii in a lab, however, is no simple task. These jellyfish are fragile, and their life cycle can be difficult to replicate consistently in captivity. Moreover, inducing transdifferentiation on command is still more art than science. In many cases, the jellyfish will only revert to a polyp under specific stress conditions, like a sudden drop in temperature or injury. And not all of them make the transition successfully. It's a delicate high-stakes transformation. Still, for those researchers dedicated to unlocking its secrets, the work is deeply rewarding. The jellyfish's genome has been sequenced, revealing unique patterns in genes associated with DNA repair, cell cycle control, and stress resistance. Understanding how these genes work together to orchestrate cellular rejuvenation could provide insights not only into aging, but into cancer biology as well. After all, cancer is, in a way, a malfunction of cellular growth and regeneration. Studying how Turritopsis dohrnii does it correctly might reveal how to prevent cells from going rogue. Beyond the lab, the idea of immortality has always fascinated humans. Myths of eternal youth, fountains of rejuvenation, and deathless beings are woven through literature and folklore around the world. And yet, here we have a tiny jellyfish quietly doing something those stories only imagined. It doesn't boast or sparkle. It doesn't call attention to itself, but it performs a biological feat more remarkable than most legendary creatures. What's also intriguing is how unassuming this animal is. If you were to scoop up a bit of seawater and find one inside, you might not even notice it. And yet, it has one of the most extraordinary life histories of any organism on the planet. It's a poignant reminder that the most remarkable things aren't always the loudest, the biggest, or the most dramatic. Sometimes they're nearly invisible, floating quietly just beneath the surface. In the context of the greater jellyfish family, Turritopsis dohrnii is part of the hydrozoans, which differ from the more familiar cyphozoan jellyfish in a few ways. Hydrozoans often have both polyp and medusa stages in their life cycle, and many are colonial, meaning multiple individuals join together to form a single organism. This makes the immortal jellyfish's solo act of transformation all the more impressive. It's doing this incredible reset as an individual, not as part of a collective. Interestingly, the species wasn't always known for its age-defying ability. It was first described in the late 19th century, but its regenerative talents weren't discovered until the 1990s. A German marine biology student named Christian Sommer was studying hydrozoans near Genoa, Italy, when he noticed that some of his specimens weren't dying as expected. Instead, they were reverting. At first, this seemed like an error, but further research confirmed the phenomenon. Since then, it has sparked a flurry of curiosity in the scientific world. The implications of this discovery go far beyond one jellyfish species. It challenges the notion that aging is a one-way street. While Turritopsis dohrnii is not alone in being able to regenerate certain tissues, salamanders, starfish, and axolotls also excel in this. Its full body transformation sets it apart. It's a reminder that nature's playbook is far more diverse and creative than we often give it credit for. What's also beautiful is how calm and unhurried this entire process is. There's no urgency in the jellyfish's movement. It pulses gently through the water, like a living heartbeat, until the moment comes to begin again. It doesn't rush its transformation. It doesn't panic. It simply becomes what it needs to be. For all our advances in medicine and technology, we are still humbled by creatures like this. A jellyfish the size of a lentil may hold clues to some of the biggest questions in biology, questions about life, aging, and even mortality. And yet it drifts, unnoticed in the world's oceans, offering no drama, no spectacle, just an elegant loop of being. There's something strangely comforting about that. In a world obsessed with progress and forward motion, the immortal jellyfish quietly rewinds. Not because it's avoiding change, but because it knows that sometimes the best way forward is to begin again. Let's take a moment to appreciate the quiet art of punching, not in the boxing ring, not in a bar fight, and certainly not in slow-motion action movies, but underwater, in the warm tropical reefs of the Indo-Pacific. Down here, Nestled among coral crevices and tidal sand lives one of the most absurdly powerful animals on Earth. It's called the mantis shrimp. And while it doesn't look particularly intimidating, imagine a rainbow-coloured lobster that someone accidentally designed in high saturation. It holds one of the fastest and most violent punches in the entire animal kingdom. Before we get into the details of that punch, let's clarify one thing. The name mantis shrimp is a bit misleading. It's not a true shrimp, and it's not a mantis either. It belongs to a group of crustaceans known as stomatopods, and it's been evolving separately from other crustaceans for hundreds of millions of years. In fact, stomatopods diverged from other crustaceans long before dinosaurs ever appeared on the scene. These animals have had a lot of time to perfect their rather unorthodox skill set. Now, about that punch. The mantis shrimp's weapon of choice is its specialised pair of appendages, known as raptorial claws. These come in two main styles, spearers and smashers. Spearer types, as the name suggests, use spiny, barbed limbs to stab soft-bodied prey like fish. But the smashers, that's where things get truly wild. Smasher mantis shrimp wield clubs that can deliver a blow with the speed of a bullet, literally. They can accelerate their limbs at over 50 miles per hour, completing a strike in less than 3 milliseconds. That's faster than a blink, faster than most camera shutters, and definitely faster than any boxer. In fact, the acceleration is so extreme that the water around the claw briefly vaporizes, creating a tiny pocket of vacuum called a cavitation bubble. When this bubble collapses, it generates a secondary shock wave and even a tiny flash of light and heat. That's right, the mantis shrimp punch is so fast it produces a burst of light and can boil the water in its path. Twice. This two-hit combo, first from the physical blow and then from the cavitation shock, is enough to crack crab shells, shatter snail houses, and occasionally break aquarium glass. Yes, really. Aquarists sometimes keep mantis shrimp in thick acrylic tanks because regular glass just isn't strong enough. There have been stories of mantis shrimp punching straight through the walls of their enclosures and making an unscheduled bid for freedom. Despite their explosive temper, mantis shrimp aren't indiscriminate brawlers. They are highly specialised hunters and use their incredible punches with precision. They typically wait in burrows or rocky crevices, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When prey wanders too close, perhaps an unsuspecting crab or snail, it only takes one lightning-fast punch to reduce dinner to manageable fragments. But the mantis shrimp doesn't stop at supercharged fists. It also boasts one of the most advanced visual systems in the animal kingdom. While humans have 3 types of colour photoreceptors, red, green and blue, the mantis shrimp has 12 to 16, depending on the species. Some researchers say it can detect ultraviolet light, polarised light, and probably a whole spectrum of colours that human eyes can't even conceptualise. Imagine trying to describe the colour blorg to someone who only sees in black and white. That's the visual chasm between us and the mantis shrimp. This extraordinary eyesight is made possible by the structure of its compound eyes, which are perched on stalks and can move independently. Each eye is divided into 3 parts, allowing the mantis shrimp to see objects with trinocular vision in each individual eye. That means it can determine depth and shape with just one eye, an ability most animals need 2 eyes to accomplish. The middle section of the eye scans the environment in horizontal bands, essentially creating a layered, constantly updating 3D model of everything around it. Scientists still aren't entirely sure why the mantis shrimp evolved such a complex visual system. Some believe it's for detecting prey or predators hidden in the dazzling chaos of coral reefs. Others think it might be related to communication. Mantis shrimp often engage in elaborate rituals, waving their appendages, displaying their vibrant colours, and even sparring with rivals. Perhaps all those extra photoreceptors help them read subtle colour cues that we simply can't perceive, and what colours they are. Mantis shrimp come in an astonishing array of hues, from vivid oranges and electric blues to greens that shimmer like gemstones. The peacock mantis shrimp, One of the most well-known species looks like it was designed by a child let loose in a box of crayons. This flamboyant colouring may serve multiple purposes: camouflage among coral, warning predators to back off, or signalling to potential mates. Despite their fierce reputation, mantis shrimp lead surprisingly structured lives. They're often monogamous, forming pairs that share and defend a burrow together. This kind of long-term pairing is rare among crustaceans, and it adds another layer of intrigue to their already puzzling lifestyle. They also spend a good deal of time maintaining their homes, excavating sand, reinforcing walls, and keeping the entrance clear. It's a bit like having a gladiator who moonlights as an interior decorator. Mantis shrimp are found in tropical and subtropical waters, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, often hiding in sandy or rocky areas where they can dig out a burrow. Their habitats are diverse. Some prefer coral reefs, while others are more at home in seagrass beds or mud flats. Wherever they live, they play an important ecological role, controlling populations of smaller invertebrates and contributing to the balance of the reef community. Their evolutionary path is just as fascinating as their physiology. Fossil records show that stomatopods have been around for over 400 million years, making them older than dinosaurs and older even than flowering plants. In all that time, they haven't changed much, which suggests they were onto a winning formula early on. When you've got the eyes of a high-tech drone and fists that could dent a car, there's not a lot of incentive to reinvent yourself. The punch mechanism itself is a marvel of biomechanical engineering. The claw works like a spring-loaded trap. Muscles slowly contract and store energy in a saddle-shaped structure in the limb, much like pulling back a slingshot. When the energy is released, the limb snaps forward at incredible speed, delivering that signature blow. It's a complex interplay of muscle, exoskeleton, and physics, a natural weapon that's been fine-tuned over millions of years. In recent years, engineers have begun to study mantis shrimp mechanics for inspiration in designing high-impact materials and robotics. Their claws endure repeated violent impacts without cracking, thanks to a unique composition of materials that dissipate energy efficiently. These findings are being applied in fields ranging from body armor to aerospace. It turns out nature's little pugilist is also a materials science genius. Despite their potential for violence, mantis shrimp are not aggressive toward humans unless provoked or mishandled. Divers occasionally get nipped when they poke around crevices without looking, but overall mantis shrimp would rather go about their business than get into unnecessary scuffles. In captivity, however, they need to be kept alone. Their temperaments are not suited to roommates. For all their ferocity, there's a strange elegance to the mantis shrimp. Its movements are calculated and graceful, its colours dazzling, its vision alien. It's a contradiction in motion, both artist and assassin, rainbow and wrecking ball, a creature that shouldn't exist and yet does, perfectly adapted to its niche and unapologetically bizarre. In a world where we often assume size equals strength, the mantis shrimp reminds us that power can come in small, flamboyant packages. It's a creature that takes no shortcuts in its design, one that's been crafted by evolutionary forces with both creativity and a mischievous sense of humour. Whether it's smashing through shells or scanning the world in colours we can't even name, the mantis shrimp is living proof that sometimes nature likes to show off. Imagine a creature that lives in complete darkness, spends most of its life underground, never gets cancer, barely feels pain, and runs a social structure that would make some ant colonies look disorganized. That might sound like the setup for a sci-fi novel, but it's all true, and it belongs to one of the oddest and most fascinating mammals on Earth, the naked mole rat. Found primarily in the arid regions of East Africa, particularly Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya, the naked mole rat is a wrinkled, buck-toothed, nearly hairless rodent that spends nearly its entire life beneath the soil. At first glance, it doesn't seem like a champion of evolutionary fitness. It looks like someone stretched a baby mouse and forgot to add fur. But what it lacks in charm, at least by conventional standards, it more than makes up for in biological superpowers. Let's start with the obvious. Yes, it's naked. Or mostly so. naked mole rats have just a few scattered hairs, mostly around their noses and tails, which likely serve a sensory function in the dark tunnels they inhabit. Their skin is pale and almost translucent, and because they live underground where sunlight never reaches, they have little need for pigmentation. They're not trying to win any beauty contest, but they don't have to. Their looks are finely tuned for life underground. They're also not really moles, nor are they rats. Taxonomically, they fall into the family Bathyergidae, or African mole rats, but they're not closely related to the moles you find in your garden, nor to the typical rats skittering around city streets. Evolution just gave them a similar look and lifestyle. It's a case of convergent evolution, different species arriving at similar solutions to similar problems. One of the most striking features of the naked mole rat is its social structure. It's one of only two known eusocial mammals, the other being the Damaraland mole rat. Eusociality is a term more often used for insects like bees, ants, and termites. In these societies, individuals are divided into reproductive and non-reproductive castes, and they all work together to support the colony. In a naked mole rat colony, there is a single breeding female, the queen, and a few chosen males that serve as her consorts. The rest of the colony, sometimes numbering up to 300 individuals, is made up of non-breeding workers and soldiers. These individuals dig tunnels, gather food, care for the young, and defend the colony from threats like snakes. They live in a vast underground network of tunnels that can stretch for several kilometers, with designated areas for nesting, food storage, and waste. It's like a rodent city, and everyone knows their role. The queen maintains her status not just through social dominance, but also through a fascinating form of chemical control. She produces pheromones that suppress the reproductive systems of other females in the colony. If the queen dies or is removed, chaos ensues. Other females begin to fight, and after a fierce power struggle, one emerges as the new queen. She undergoes significant physical changes, including a lengthening of her spine to accommodate more offspring. It's not exactly a peaceful monarchy, but it's effective. Then there's the matter of pain, or the remarkable lack of it. Naked mole rats are famously insensitive to certain types of pain, particularly the burning sensation associated with acid or capsaicin, the compound that makes chili peppers hot. In most mammals, exposure to these substances would trigger an immediate and uncomfortable response. But in naked mole rats, the pain receptors simply don't react in the usual way. This isn't just a fun party trick. It's likely an adaptation to their high carbon dioxide, low oxygen environment underground, where acid buildup is more common. Their nervous systems have evolved to ignore stimuli that would otherwise be overwhelming. In recent years, scientists have looked more closely at the molecules responsible for this pain resistance. It turns out that specific sodium ion channels in the nerves of naked mole rats function differently, preventing the transmission of pain signals under certain conditions. Understanding these mechanisms could one day help researchers develop new treatments for chronic pain in humans. But that's not even the most astonishing part. Naked mole rats have become something of a rock star in biomedical research because of their apparent resistance to cancer. While most rodents, especially mice, are highly susceptible to tumours, naked mole rats are remarkably resilient. They live up to 30 years, a jaw-droppingly long time for a rodent, and remain healthy and active throughout most of their lives. Researchers believe this cancer resistance may be linked to a unique sugar molecule called high molecular mass hyaluronan, which is found in their tissues. This substance is 5 times larger than the equivalent in humans and seems to prevent cells from crowding together too tightly, a common trigger for tumour formation. Naked mole rat cells are also hypersensitive to contact inhibition, meaning they stop growing and dividing when they sense that space is running out. It's like their cells are exceptionally polite dinner guests. They know when to stop. The implications of this discovery are significant. If scientists can understand how naked mole rats maintain cellular integrity and avoid cancer, it could open the door to novel therapies or preventative strategies in human medicine. Of course, we're still a long way from translating these findings directly, but the fact that nature has already engineered such a solution is deeply intriguing. Then there's their metabolism. Living underground isn't just about avoiding predators, it also comes with its own set of challenges. Oxygen levels can be low, especially in tightly packed tunnels. Most mammals wouldn't survive long in that kind of environment, but naked mole rats have adapted in extraordinary ways. They can survive without oxygen for up to 18 minutes by switching their metabolism to one that more closely resembles that of a plant or insect. Instead of using glucose as their primary energy source, they switch to metabolizing fructose, which allows their cells to keep functioning without oxygen. It's a bit like flipping the engine of a car from gasoline to solar power when the fuel runs out. Their hemoglobin also binds oxygen more effectively than that of other mammals, helping them extract every possible molecule of oxygen from the air. And they have a lower resting metabolic rate, which means they don't use up energy as quickly. It's not the most glamorous lifestyle, but it's incredibly efficient. Interestingly, despite their highly organized colonies and physical toughness, naked mole rats are quite chatty. They use a range of vocalizations, over a dozen distinct types, to communicate with each other. These include squeaks, chirps, and grunts, often used to identify individuals and reinforce social bonds. In fact, recent studies have shown that each colony may have its own unique vocal dialect, almost like an accent. It's a bit like a rodent version of regional slang. Even their teeth are adapted to their underground world. Naked mole rats do most of their digging with their large protruding incisors, which can move independently and operate like a pair of tiny excavation tools. Their lips close behind their teeth to prevent dirt from getting into their mouths while they dig. It's a little detail, but it speaks to just how specialized these creatures are. For all their bizarre features and subterranean habits, naked mole rats offer an incredible example of how life can adapt to extreme conditions. They don't conform to the usual rules. They found a way to live long, avoid disease, manage pain, and thrive in a low-oxygen, lightless world. They don't just survive in the shadows, they've mastered them. There's a kind of poetic irony in the naked mole rat story. An animal so seemingly unassuming, even unattractive by traditional standards, turns out to be a goldmine of scientific insight. They're not winning beauty contests, but they're quietly rewriting what we know about biology, medicine, and aging. In the end, it seems that what matters most isn't fur or charm, but resilience, ingenuity, and a willingness to dig deep, literally and figuratively. Deep within the forests of Australia, a bird perches silently on a branch. It looks ordinary enough, medium-sized, with elegant brownish-grey plumage and a long tail. But give it a few seconds, and this seemingly unremarkable bird will do something utterly bewildering. It opens its beak and lets out a perfectly accurate imitation of a chainsaw, or a camera shutter, or the alarm from a passing car. This is not a joke, and it's not a trick of the ears. It's the lyrebird, perhaps nature's most gifted mimic, and certainly one of its most entertaining. The lyrebird doesn't just copy sounds, it recreates them, often with eerie precision, and it doesn't limit itself to other birds. It's been recorded mimicking human voices, construction work, camera clicks, dogs barking, and even the beep of reversing trucks. In one of the more famous recordings, a lyrebird in a wildlife sanctuary in New South Wales perfectly reproduced the sound of a chainsaw, complete with the initial revving, followed by the rhythmic buzz of the blade, and it didn't stop there. It added the thud of falling trees and even the distant rumble of other machines, layering them like a sound designer mixing an audio track. How does it do this? The lyrebird's voice box, or syrinx, is unusually complex. While all songbirds have a syrinx that can produce a wide range of sounds, the lyrebird's is highly muscular and extremely flexible, giving it an incredible degree of control over pitch, rhythm, and volume. This vocal range allows it to replicate nearly any sound it hears, often after only hearing it a few times. The detail can be astonishing. Some lyrebirds reproduce not just a song but the environmental reverb and harmonics around it, as if they're recording on high-definition audio rather than just singing. The reason for this extraordinary mimicry lies in courtship. Male lyrebirds are the true performers here. When the breeding season arrives, they construct a small mound in the forest, essentially a stage, and begin their display. They puff up their feathers, fan their elaborate tail into a dramatic lyre shape, and launch into a vocal medley that can last for hours. This performance is designed to impress nearby females, and it's not just a random jumble of sounds. The males arrange their mimicry in carefully crafted sequences, blending calls of other bird species with their own original notes and environmental sound effects. In the wild, a male lyrebird's display may include up to 25 different bird species imitated one after the other, sometimes with such precision that other birds respond as if they were hearing their own kind. The goal isn't necessarily to trick, it's to dazzle. A male that can convincingly mimic a wide range of calls is demonstrating his intelligence, memory, and overall fitness as a mate. After all, producing such a complex vocal performance takes a lot of energy and coordination. The lyrebird's tail also plays a supporting role in these performances. The bird is named for the shape of this tail, which resembles a classical lyre when fully fanned out. The tail feathers are long and ornamental, with two outermost feathers curling outward like the arms of a lyre. During a display, the male lifts the tail over his head in a spectacular arch, creating a kind of visual halo that frames his body while he sings. It's a multi-sensory experience, a combination of sight, sound, and movement designed to capture attention. Interestingly, young lyrebirds don't start life with these mimicry skills. They learn them over time by listening to the sounds around them. In some cases, lyrebirds raised in captivity or near human activity will develop sound repertoires that include chainsaws, camera shutters, mobile ringtones, and even snippets of human conversation. There are reports of lyrebirds mimicking flute music, car alarms, and the hum of electrical appliances. In zoos, they've been known to pick up sounds from their surroundings so accurately that zookeepers sometimes mistake the birds' calls for real machinery. This ability to pick up environmental noise has led to some poignant reflections on the human impact on wildlife. A lyrebird imitating a chainsaw is, in one sense, a marvel. In another, it's a sobering reminder of deforestation and habitat loss. These birds don't mimic for fun, they mimic what they hear. And if what they hear is the sound of trees being felled, it means those trees are disappearing from their world. Sound, in this case, becomes a kind of ecological footprint, a living record of what the forest has endured. Despite their remarkable abilities, lyrebirds are shy and elusive by nature. They prefer dense forests, where their brown feathers blend in with the leaf litter and underbrush. They're ground foragers, scratching through fallen leaves for insects, worms, and other small invertebrates. Their strong legs and claws are well adapted for digging, and their long tails, while elegant, are surprisingly practical when it comes to balance and manoeuvring through thick vegetation. Australia is home to two species of lyrebird. The superb lyrebird, which is the most famous and widespread, is found in the forests of southeastern Australia, including Victoria and New South Wales. The other, the Albert's lyrebird, is more secretive and rare, living in a small area of rainforest in southeastern Queensland. Albert's lyrebird is less showy in appearance, but no less talented in the vocal department. In terms of reproduction, lyrebirds are not prolific. The female lays a single egg per breeding season, which she incubates and raises alone. After the male's elaborate performance and courtship displays, his role in the process is done. The female builds the nest, incubates the egg for about 6 weeks, and then cares for the chick, which remains in the nest for up to 7 weeks after hatching. It's a slow and delicate reproductive strategy, which makes lyrebird populations particularly vulnerable to environmental disturbances. One curious fact about lyrebirds is that they seem to have excellent long-term memory. Not only do they remember songs and sounds they've heard throughout their lives, but they can also recall and reproduce sounds years after first hearing them. This has led to some fascinating cases in wildlife sanctuaries and zoos, where individual lyrebirds continued to mimic long-retired or long-gone environmental noises from their past. In one case, a lyrebird kept producing the sound of a camera shutter decades after cameras of that type had stopped being used in the area. Despite all this, lyrebirds are not aggressive or pushy in their performances. Their courtship displays are earnest and intricate, but not confrontational. They're not fighters or flashy in a dominant sense. They're artists. And in a world often dominated by brute force and flamboyant aggression, the lyrebird's quiet genius feels refreshingly poetic. The evolution of this mimicry remains an area of active research. While sexual selection clearly plays a major role, some scientists wonder if mimicry also serves other purposes, such as deterring predators, confusing rivals, or enhancing territory defense. There's still much we don't know, but one thing is clear. The lyrebird's talents are among the most sophisticated vocal feats in the natural world. Even among songbirds, which are known for their melodic abilities, the lyrebird is in a category of its own. Its brain is wired not only to recognize and replicate sounds, but also to organize them into sequences, patterns, and layers. That kind of auditory processing is rare in the animal kingdom, and is one of the reasons why lyrebirds are often likened to composers or sound engineers. In the end, the lyrebird is more than just a curiosity. It's a reminder of how rich and strange the natural world can be. It tells us that intelligence comes in many forms, and that creativity is not the sole domain of humans. Here is a bird that takes the noise of its environment and turns it into a symphony, part echo, part performance, part survival strategy. And when you stand quietly in the Australian forest, listening to a lyrebird perform, it's hard not to be moved. You hear not just the calls of birds and the rustle of wind, but the layered history of a place, sung back to you by a creature that has been listening all along. In the tangled underwater forests of southern Australia, where the seagrass flows like green silk in the currents, and the sunlight filters through in golden ribbons, lives a creature so delicately adorned, so dreamlike in appearance, that it looks more like a figment of imagination than a living organism. It doesn't swim so much as it drifts, as if unsure whether it's an animal or a drifting scrap of seaweed. This is the leafy sea dragon, one of nature's most exquisite exercises in disguise. A relative of the seahorse and pipefish, the leafy sea dragon belongs to the family Syngnathidae, and it's found almost exclusively along the southern and western coasts of Australia. Its body is slender and elongated, covered with long leaf-like appendages that sprout from nearly every angle, giving it the uncanny appearance of floating kelp. These extensions are not used for propulsion. They serve no mechanical function. Instead, they are pure camouflage, nature's equivalent of a costume designed to fool even the most observant predator. Camouflage in the ocean isn't exactly rare. Fish blend into the sand, octopuses change their colour and texture, and cuttlefish can flash entire sequences of hypnotic patterns. But the leafy sea dragon takes a different approach. Rather than actively changing its appearance, it has evolved to look like something that doesn't even move with intention. It mimics the look of drifting plant matter so perfectly that predators often swim right past, unaware that what they took for floating debris is actually a slow, deliberate creature going about its day. Unlike the more familiar seahorse, the leafy sea dragon doesn't anchor itself to seagrass or coral. Instead, it floats gently with the current, relying on small, nearly transparent fins on its neck and back to maneuver. These fins are almost invisible to the naked eye, fluttering rapidly to give it a subtle, ghost-like movement through the water. It doesn't dart or dash. It glides, elegantly and unhurried, like a leaf caught in a lazy current. This slow movement is part of its camouflage strategy. Speed would betray it. The leafy sea dragon's greatest defense is its ability to remain unnoticed, blending in with the swaying marine vegetation. Its color, which ranges from yellow-green to brownish-gold, often matches the seagrass and kelp beds where it makes its home. The hues are influenced by the animal's diet and environment, making each leafy sea dragon slightly different in tone and pattern. Speaking of diet, the leafy sea dragon is a quiet, unassuming predator. It feeds primarily on tiny crustaceans like mysid shrimp, plankton, and other small organisms. It doesn't have teeth, or even a jaw in the traditional sense. Instead, it uses a long, tubular snout to suck up its prey, much like a straw. There's no chase, no battle. The prey drifts by, and with a gentle vacuum-like motion, it disappears into the sea dragon's slender mouth. It's a peaceful existence, one that involves a lot of drifting and a little bit of slurping. But peaceful doesn't mean uneventful. Like its seahorse cousins, the leafy sea dragon has a particularly unusual twist in the realm of parenting. It's the male who carries the eggs. After an elaborate courtship dance, during which the pair may mirror each other's movements and gently intertwine their tails, the female deposits her eggs onto a special brood patch on the underside of the male's tail. This patch is full of small blood vessels that help oxygenate the eggs while they develop. Over the next few weeks, the male carries the developing embryos, protecting them from harm and supplying them with oxygen until they're ready to hatch. This form of male pregnancy is rare in the animal kingdom and unique to the Syngnathidae family. In the case of the leafy sea dragon, the male can carry around 250 eggs at a time. When the eggs hatch, the baby dragons are tiny replicas of their parents, already adorned with miniature leaf-like protrusions. From the moment they're born, they're on their own. The father provides no further care, and the young must navigate the world using the same strategy as the adults. Stay still, stay hidden, and hope not to be noticed. Despite their remarkable camouflage and relatively low activity levels, leafy sea dragons face significant threats in the wild. Their specialized habitat, coastal seagrass meadows and kelp forests, is increasingly under pressure from pollution, climate change, and coastal development. These underwater ecosystems are delicate, and their degradation has a direct impact on the sea dragons that depend on them for survival. Additionally, while it's illegal to collect or export leafy sea dragons, they've been targeted in the past by the aquarium trade due to their stunning appearance. Australia has recognised the leafy sea dragon's unique status and has implemented strong conservation protections. It's the marine emblem of South Australia, and efforts have been made to preserve its habitat and educate the public about its ecological importance. Divers are encouraged not to touch or disturb these animals, and research projects have been established to monitor their populations and understand more about their behaviour and reproductive cycles. Interestingly, for all their visual splendour, leafy sea dragons are quite difficult to study in the wild. Their camouflage is so effective that even trained marine biologists sometimes swim right past them. In some cases, researchers use underwater cameras and tagging techniques to keep track of individuals, though tagging such a delicate creature must be done with extreme care. Captive breeding has been challenging, and very few institutions around the world have successfully bred leafy sea dragons in captivity, further emphasising the importance of protecting their natural habitats. Part of their challenge in captivity lies in their sensitivity to environmental conditions. Leafy sea dragons require very specific water temperatures, salinity levels, and diet to thrive. Even small deviations can lead to stress or illness. Their feeding habits, which involve picking off tiny live prey throughout the day, are also difficult to replicate in a controlled environment. It's one of the reasons why you won't find them in most public aquariums. They're simply too delicate and too specialised. Despite these challenges, their popularity continues to grow. Their likeness appears in Australian postage stamps, marine conservation logos, and even tattoos. People are drawn to their surreal appearance and gentle demeanour, as if the leafy sea dragon represents something ethereal and otherworldly. In a way it does. It's a creature that defies expectation. A slow-moving, plant-like animal that has mastered the art of invisibility in a world full of motion and noise. What's especially striking is that this remarkable camouflage wasn't built for battle or aggression. It wasn't designed to overpower prey or fend off predators with venom or claws. It's simply a masterpiece of hiding in plain sight. The leafy sea dragon doesn't try to control its environment. It moves with it, becoming a part of the underwater tapestry rather than trying to stand out. It's a lesson in stillness, in patience, and in the power of subtlety. The ocean is often portrayed as a place of dramatic hunts and vibrant spectacles. Whales breaching, sharks circling, coral reefs bursting with life. But among these grand scenes, the leafy sea dragon offers a quieter kind of wonder. It asks us to slow down, to look more carefully, and to appreciate the elegance of adaptation. It's a reminder that not all beauty is bold, and not all survival is about strength. Sometimes, the greatest success lies in disappearing entirely, in moving so gently that the world forgets you're even there. In the end, the leafy sea dragon is not just an oddity. It's a symbol of balance between visibility and invisibility, form and function, art and biology. A creature that looks like it was imagined by a dreamer, but functions with the precision of evolution's finest handiwork. A seaweed masquerade brought to life, flowing gently with the tides of time. In the damp, mucky wetlands of eastern Canada and the northeastern United States, hidden beneath the fallen leaves and mossy forest floors, lives an animal that seems like it was designed in a laboratory, where the brief was weird but make it useful. It's not much to look at. A small, nearly blind, star-nosed mole with velvety brown fur and giant claws for digging. But once you see its face, you'll understand why it made the cut for this exploration of nature's oddest features. Right at the tip of its snout is a ring of 22 pink, fleshy tentacles that fan out like the petals of a flower or the tendrils of some alien sea creature. And if you're brave enough to get past the initial shiver of revulsion, you'll discover something astonishing. This odd little mole is the fastest eater in the animal kingdom. Let's begin with the nose. Technically speaking, those 22 finger-like appendages are not part of the nose at all. They're called Eimer's organs, and they're some of the most sensitive tactile structures found in any mammal. There are over 25,000 of these tiny sensory domes packed onto the tentacles, each of which is capable of detecting incredibly subtle changes in pressure, texture, and shape. To give you a sense of how sensitive that is, imagine trying to identify a braille pattern with your face while sprinting through a tunnel. That's the kind of resolution we're talking about. The star-nosed mole uses this array like a highly specialized touch-based radar system. It can scan and map its environment at lightning speed, identifying objects with a series of rapid-fire touches that look like it's frantically sniffing the air, but much faster and more precise. Researchers have observed that the mole can examine up to 12 separate objects in a single second, building a tactile image of its surroundings that's probably as vivid to the mole as vision is to us. It needs this kind of power because its habitat is anything but forgiving. Star-nosed moles live underground or in swampy soil, where visibility is close to zero and every second counts. These moles are active foragers, constantly tunneling through the dirt or paddling through underwater mud in search of worms, insects, and small aquatic invertebrates. Their prey is often fast, slippery, or hidden in silt, so having a lightning-fast touch-based detection system gives them a critical edge. And fast is not an exaggeration. The star-nosed mole has been clocked identifying and consuming prey in as little as 120 milliseconds. That's faster than the human eye can blink. In fact, the Guinness World Record for the fastest eating mammal belongs to this mole. It finds food, decides whether it's edible, and consumes it in less time than it takes you to realize there was even something there in the first place. The mole doesn't chew thoughtfully or savor its meals. It's a drive-by diner, gulping down prey like a tiny squinty vacuum cleaner. What's remarkable is how much processing power this all requires. The star's sensory input is routed directly into a specialized part of the brain called the somatosensory cortex. In most mammals, this region devotes a disproportionate amount of space to processing signals from the most sensitive parts of the body. Think fingertips in humans or whiskers in cats. In the star-nosed mole, Nearly half of this brain region is dedicated solely to the star. That's a lot of cerebral real estate for a nose, but it makes sense given how critical the star is to the mole's survival. Interestingly, one small part of the star, just a single ray on the underside, is even more sensitive than the others. This is sometimes referred to as the fovea of the star, drawing comparison to the fovea in the human eye, which is responsible for our sharpest vision. The mole uses this particular ray to make final, high-resolution touches, almost like a fingertip double-checking what the rest of the hand has already felt. It's a built-in verification system for a mole that doesn't have the luxury of second-guessing. Despite their strange appearance, star-nosed moles are surprisingly good swimmers. Unlike most of their underground cousins, these moles are semi-aquatic and spend a significant amount of time foraging in shallow water. Their front paws are adapted for digging, but they use their back feet and tail to paddle through wetland environments with surprising agility. In fact, their tail is thick and slightly scaly, and it serves as a fat storage organ, helping them get through periods of scarcity in the winter months. They also have an impressive cold tolerance. Star-nosed moles remain active throughout the winter, tunneling beneath the snow and even swimming under ice in search of food. Their dense, water-repellent fur helps insulate them, and their metabolism keeps them going in conditions that would freeze less hardy creatures in place. They don't hibernate, and they don't really slow down. Their world is all about constant motion and constant snacking. From a reproductive standpoint, these moles are relatively typical. They breed in early spring, and the female gives birth to a litter of 2 to 7 pups after a gestation period of about 45 days. The young are born blind and helpless, and their iconic star nose doesn't develop fully until a few days after birth. By the time they're 3 weeks old, the pups are already exploring outside the nest, and they're weaned shortly thereafter. They mature quickly and are capable of breeding within a year. While they may seem rare or exotic, star-nosed moles are actually fairly common within their range, though they're rarely seen due to their subterranean and aquatic habits. They're secretive and efficient, spending most of their time out of sight and emerging only to move between tunnels or burrow systems. Because of this, many people who live near their habitats have no idea they're sharing the landscape with one of the strangest mammals on Earth. And strange though they may be, these moles play a valuable ecological role. By constantly turning over soil and sediment, they aerate the ground and help distribute nutrients. Their foraging also controls populations of soil-dwelling insects and other invertebrates, maintaining a balance in the ecosystems they inhabit. Like many misunderstood creatures, the star-nosed mole is quietly making the world a little better, while asking nothing in return, except perhaps a fresh worm and some privacy. As you might expect, their unique adaptations have caught the attention of scientists and engineers. The star's ultra-sensitive touch has inspired research into tactile sensors and robotics, particularly for machines that need to operate in environments where vision is limited or unavailable. Mimicking the star's ability to rapidly identify shapes and textures could be a game-changer for underwater exploration, search and rescue bots, or even surgical tools. Nature has always got there first, and did it with pink, squishy tentacles no less. Despite their alien appearance, there's something rather endearing about star-nosed moles. They're busy, efficient, and totally unpretentious. They have no interest in being pretty, and they certainly didn't evolve to please the human eye. They're built for their world, a world of wet roots, muddy burrows, and half seconds between hunger and satisfaction. Their star-shaped nose, for all its strangeness, is a triumph of evolution. It's not flashy for the sake of being flashy. It's there because it works, because in the dark, damp, pressure-filled environment these moles call home, touch matters more than anything else. And by mastering that sense to a degree almost no other mammal can match, the star-nosed mole has carved out a niche where speed, precision, and a willingness to stay unseen are all that's needed. In the grand parade of animal oddities, it's easy to be distracted by the big and the dramatic, the creatures with dazzling colours, oversized tusks, or gravity-defying feats. But the star-nosed mole, with its humble lifestyle and alien face, proves that sometimes the strangest animals are also the most quietly extraordinary. In the hidden spaces of the world, among roots and rain-soaked soil, a tiny mole is doing something no one else can do, and it's doing it all by feel. Some animals survive by being fast, others make it through the wild with sharp claws, venomous fangs, or the ability to blend invisibly into their surroundings. And then there's the pangolin, an animal that looks like it wandered out of a medieval bestiary and accidentally ended up in the 21st century. It doesn't bite, doesn't sting, doesn't run particularly fast, and it's not especially sneaky. But it does come equipped with a suit of natural armour so impressive it could make a knight jealous. At first glance, a pangolin resembles a walking pine cone, or maybe an animated artichoke with legs. Its entire body from head to tail is covered in tough, overlapping scales made of keratin, the same protein found in human fingernails and hair. These scales are not just for show. When threatened, the pangolin curls into a tight ball, tucking in its head and limbs, presenting nothing but a sphere of sharp, impenetrable plating. For most predators, that's game over. Lions have been known to give up on trying to pry open a curled pangolin. Hyenas lose interest. Even leopards often walk away in frustration. But what's underneath all that armour is just as fascinating. Pangolins are mammals, although at first glance they may not seem like it. They belong to their own order, Pholidota, and are found across parts of Asia and Africa. There are 8 known species, some arboreal and others terrestrial, and all of them are insectivores. Their favourite food? Ants and termites. Lots and lots of them. Equipped with long, sticky tongues that can stretch up to 16 inches in some species, longer than the animal's own body, they can probe deep into termite mounds and ant nests, slurping up thousands of insects in a single sitting. They don't have teeth, so they rely on small stones in their stomachs and powerful stomach muscles to grind up their food. Their tongues are anchored not in their throats, like most animals, but deep in their chest cavity, near the pelvis. It's one of the longest tongue-to-body size ratios in the animal kingdom, and it gives the pangolin an eerie ability to dart its tongue out with precision and speed. Their snouts are long and narrow, perfectly adapted to wedge into crevices or between bark and branches. Their sense of smell is exceptional, helping them locate insect colonies underground or hidden inside rotting logs. When a pangolin finds a promising nest, it uses its strong forelimbs and sharp claws to tear it open. These claws are serious tools, curved, hard, and sharp enough to rip into termite mounds made of hardened earth. They also come in handy for climbing, especially in the tree-dwelling species like the white-bellied and black-bellied pangolins of Central Africa. Interestingly, pangolins walk in a slightly awkward fashion. On the ground, they often move on their hind legs, using their front limbs more like arms held aloft, with the claws curled inward to avoid dulling them against the ground. It gives them a bit of a lurching gait, somewhere between a dinosaur and a sleepy toddler. They're generally solitary and mostly nocturnal, spending their nights foraging and their days sleeping in burrows or the hollows of trees. Despite their formidable appearance and extraordinary adaptations, pangolins are among the most endangered mammals in the world. The reason, tragically, is those same protective scales that have allowed them to survive for millions of years. In traditional medicine practices, particularly in parts of Asia, pangolin scales are believed, without scientific basis, to have healing properties. The scales are ground into powders, brewed into tonics, or used in folk remedies. The demand is so high that pangolins have become the most heavily trafficked wild mammal on Earth. On top of this, pangolin meat is considered a delicacy in some regions, and their skins are used to make leather goods. Entire shipments of pangolins have been seized at borders, with thousands of animals packed in crates or processed into products. The scale of this trade is staggering, and it's pushing many pangolin species toward the brink of extinction. Conservationists and governments around the world have begun to act, with laws banning the trade and increased enforcement efforts. International agreements like the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or CITES, have listed all 8 species under the highest level of protection. Still, the illegal market persists, fueled by profit and misinformation. Thankfully, awareness is growing. Pangolins have become a kind of symbol for wildlife trafficking, and campaigns are underway to educate the public and protect their habitats. Sanctuaries and rehabilitation centres have been established to care for rescued individuals, though pangolins are notoriously difficult to keep in captivity. Their diet is specialised, and they are highly sensitive to stress, making long-term care a challenge even for experienced wildlife experts. Aside from human pressures, pangolins have very few natural predators. Their armour does its job remarkably well, and their strategy of curling into a ball is highly effective. But their defence has one major flaw. It doesn't work against humans. When a pangolin curls up, it becomes extremely easy to pick up, carry and transport. What works against a lion is sadly useless against poachers. Still, even in the face of these challenges, pangolins are survivors. They've been around for over 80 million years, adapting to different environments and ecological niches. From dry savannas to dense tropical forests, they've carved out a place for themselves as one of the planet's great insect controllers. An adult pangolin can consume over 70 million insects in a year, helping to regulate pest populations and maintain ecosystem balance. Farmers, in theory, should be singing their praises. Beyond their ecological role, pangolins also offer a window into the extraordinary variety of mammalian life. Their lineage is distinct, their adaptations are singular, and their story is one of both beauty and tragedy. They're quiet, solitary and secretive, asking little of the world and offering much in return. In terms of reproduction, pangolins are slow breeders. Most species give birth to a single offspring after a gestation period of about 4 to 5 months. The baby is born with soft pinkish scales that harden within a few days. Mothers are incredibly protective and will curl around their young if threatened. In some species, the baby rides on the mother's tail as she moves through the forest. This low reproductive rate makes population recovery especially slow, adding urgency to conservation efforts. For all their uniqueness, pangolins are rarely seen in the wild, and much of their behaviour remains mysterious. They are shy, avoid human contact, and live in areas that are often difficult to access. That makes studying them a challenge, but also means there is still so much to learn. Every pangolin sighting is a small miracle, a glimpse into a world that is ancient, fragile, and worth preserving. It's easy to overlook animals that aren't flashy or loud. The pangolin doesn't roar or leap or display brilliant colours. It doesn't soar through the skies or swim in vast ocean currents. It walks quietly on clawed feet, hidden beneath scales and shadow, cleaning up ants and termites, minding its own business. But its very existence is a testament to the power of evolution and the quiet genius of adaptation. In a world where so much attention goes to the fast, the fierce, or the fashionable, the pangolin reminds us that there's magic in the unassuming. Beneath those scales is a creature that has walked the earth longer than us, surviving by being gentle, specialised, and beautifully strange. It's a story worth telling, and a life worth protecting. Beneath the ocean's surface, in the warm, shallow waters of coral reefs and tropical lagoons, lives a creature so unassuming in size and so explosive in ability that it seems almost fictional. It's called the pistol shrimp, but it's not carrying any firearms. Instead, it comes with a built-in weapon, one oversized claw that doesn't just snap, it snaps with such speed and force that it creates a literal bubble of superheated, high-pressure water. That bubble, upon collapsing, generates a shockwave powerful enough to stun or kill prey, and produces a sound louder than a jet engine. Not bad for a shrimp that's only a few inches long. Let's begin with the name. The pistol shrimp is sometimes also called the snapping shrimp, and both names are apt. The defining feature is its asymmetrical claws. One is a normal pincer, and the other is a specialised weapon that looks a bit like a boxing glove attached to a crab. This oversized claw can be nearly half the size of the shrimp's entire body, and it isn't just for show. It's a highly evolved structure capable of unleashing bursts of energy that are completely disproportionate to the shrimp's size. When the pistol shrimp snaps its claw shut, it does so with incredible speed, so fast that it forces water out at such high velocity that a low-pressure bubble forms. This is not just a splash or a pop, it's a phenomenon known as cavitation. The sudden drop in pressure causes the water to vaporize locally, creating a bubble that collapses almost instantly. That collapse creates an intense shock wave, and for a fraction of a second, temperatures inside the imploding bubble can reach several thousand degrees Celsius, roughly as hot as the surface of the sun. Yes, you heard that correctly. The surface of the sun. Now, before you picture tiny crustaceans boiling the ocean, let's clarify. The superheated temperature is highly localized, lasting just microseconds in a minuscule space. It's not something you'd feel if you were swimming nearby. But for the pistol shrimp's prey, usually small fish, crustaceans, or even other shrimp, it's devastating. The shock wave from the collapsing bubble is strong enough to stun or kill outright. Once the prey is incapacitated, the shrimp grabs it with its regular claw and enjoys a quiet meal. But the punch isn't just about hunting. Pistol shrimp also use their snapping claw for communication and defense. In colonies, they'll snap to establish territory, ward off intruders, or coordinate with other members of their group. Some species are known to live in symbiotic relationships with gobies, small fish that share the shrimp's burrow. The goby acts as a lookout while the shrimp digs and maintains the burrow. The shrimp has poor eyesight and relies on physical contact to know where the goby is. It often keeps one antenna in contact with the fish, and when the goby flicks its tail, the shrimp knows to retreat. It's a buddy cop movie playing out on the ocean floor. What's even more impressive is the acoustic power of the pistol shrimp's snap. The collapse of the cavitation bubble generates a popping sound that can reach up to 210 decibels. That's louder than a gunshot, louder than a rocket launch, and technically louder than the threshold for human pain. Though again, the sound is so brief and so localized that you wouldn't hear it clearly unless you were very close and underwater. Still, in areas where pistol shrimp colonies thrive, the collective snaps can be so loud and constant that they interfere with sonar equipment. During World War II, submarine crews learned to use regions filled with snapping shrimp to mask their own acoustic signals. Nature, once again, became an unwitting participant in human affairs. These snapping shrimp belong to the family Alphidae, which includes over 600 known species distributed across the world's tropical and subtropical waters. They vary in colour and size, but the core features are consistent: asymmetrical claws, a love of burrows, and an ability to turn water into a weapon. Some live alone, some in pairs, and some in massive colonies, where the constant symphony of snapping claws sounds like a bowl of Rice Krispies in surround sound. Their biology is a masterclass in specialization. The snapping claw isn't just a strong muscle, it's also a spring-loaded mechanism. Internally, the claw has a plunger-like structure that stores energy as the claw is opened. When released, that energy is discharged in a single explosive motion. It's not unlike pulling back the hammer on a slingshot, building tension and then letting go. The actual snap happens in less than a millisecond, and it's so violent that the shrimp itself has to deal with the shock. Specialized structures help absorb the force so the creature doesn't injure itself every time it fires off a blast. Despite their formidable armament, pistol shrimp are relatively small, typically measuring between 1 and 2 inches in length. Their size makes them vulnerable to larger predators, which is why they often hide in burrows during the day and emerge at night. Their claws regenerate if lost, but it takes time, and during that vulnerable period, a pistol shrimp is more likely to retreat than pick a fight. One of the most intriguing behaviours among pistol shrimp is their tendency to form colonies, particularly in sponge habitats. Some species exhibit a kind of cooperative living where dozens of individuals share connected tunnels or sponge cavities. They appear to recognise each other and show tolerance toward group members, though outsiders are quickly chased away with an aggressive snap or two. It's a social structure that combines the communal nature of ants with the personal weaponry of a sci-fi mercenary. In terms of reproduction, pistol shrimp generally follow the typical crustacean playbook. Mating occurs when the female is soft-shelled following a molt. The male deposits sperm, and the female carries fertilized eggs beneath her abdomen until they hatch. The larvae go through several planktonic stages before settling down and metamorphosing into the familiar shrimp form. In some species, monogamous pair bonding has been observed, particularly in burrow-dwelling types. These pairs may stay together for long periods, cooperating to maintain their home and defend it from rivals. The study of pistol shrimp is not just about marine biology. It touches on physics, engineering, and even acoustics. The cavitation process is of interest to naval engineers and material scientists who want to better understand erosion and wear in machinery. Cavitation can damage ship propellers and pumps, but in the shrimp, it's harnessed in a controlled and repeatable way. Nature has created a bubble-powered weapon that engineers are still trying to replicate without destroying their equipment. In recent years, researchers have begun looking into how the pistol shrimp snapping mechanism could inspire new kinds of underwater tools or robotic systems. The precision, speed, and repeatability of the claw are unmatched, especially at such a tiny scale. It's a vivid reminder that some of the most advanced technologies on Earth already exist. They're just hiding under rocks in the coral reef. In mythology and folklore, weapons that harness elemental forces like lightning, thunder, or fire are usually wielded by gods or legendary heroes. The pistol shrimp, it seems, got its own mythical trait through millions of years of evolution, condensed into a body no longer than your pinky. It doesn't make headlines with flashy colours or dramatic hunts, but its method of survival is every bit as extraordinary. Watching a pistol shrimp in action is both mesmerising and slightly surreal. It tiptoes around the sandy substrate, its oversized claw held close like a secret. Then, in a blink, it fires, and the world around it erupts in silence and violence. There's no roar, no chase, no teeth bared in fury, just a click, a flash, and the quiet aftermath of a perfectly executed strike. For an animal so small, the pistol shrimp packs a punch that's loud enough to be heard across oceans and powerful enough to knock fish unconscious with a pop of air. It's a beautiful, bizarre fusion of biology and physics, one that leaves no doubt that the natural world still has plenty of tricks up its sleeve, or in this case, up its claw. In the vast, windswept steppes and deserts of Central Asia, where the horizon stretches into a heat-blurred mirage and sandstorms can whip across the landscape with little warning, roams an animal that looks like it's wearing the wrong nose on the right body. Meet the saiga antelope, a creature that appears to have wandered out of a Star Wars cantina scene and into the real world. Its most prominent and perplexing feature, a comically oversized drooping nose that looks part elephant, part vacuum cleaner and entirely unique. But what looks amusing at first glance is actually a masterclass in environmental adaptation. That big, bulbous nose isn't there for show. It's an evolutionary upgrade designed specifically for the harsh, unpredictable climates of the Eurasian steppe. The saiga's nose, or proboscis, functions as a sophisticated air filtration and climate control system. In the summer, when the air is thick with dust kicked up by wind and hooves, the nose filters out particulates and prevents debris from entering the lungs. And in the bitter cold of winter, when the temperature plummets far below freezing, that same structure warms the icy air before it reaches the lungs, protecting the delicate tissues from freezing damage. It's like having a built-in HVAC system right on your face. The saiga's story is one of both resilience and fragility. These antelope have been around since the Ice Age, once roaming alongside mammoths and woolly rhinos across the mammoth steppe that stretched from the British Isles to Alaska. Fossil evidence suggests they were widespread and abundant during that time, perfectly adapted to the frigid, dry grasslands of the Pleistocene. Today, their range is more restricted, mainly found in parts of Kazakhstan, Mongolia and southern Russia, with some small populations in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Saiga are medium-sized antelope with sandy-coloured fur that changes with the seasons. In the summer, their coat is thin and almost golden, blending in with the dry steppe grasses. In the winter, they grow a thicker, paler coat that insulates them against the extreme cold. Their legs are long and slender, built for distance rather than speed. They can cover incredible ground with a smooth, loping gait and migrate hundreds of miles each year in search of grazing lands and suitable conditions. Herd life is essential to saiga survival. Outside the mating season, they move in large, loose groups that may number in the thousands. These herds roam across vast landscapes, grazing on hardy steppe vegetation like saltwort, sagebrush, and various drought-resistant grasses. They're not picky eaters, they'll take what they can get, but they do need large open spaces to sustain their numbers. This nomadic lifestyle also helps them avoid predators and evade disease by not lingering too long in one place. During the spring breeding season, males gather harems of females and become fiercely territorial. Their snouts may be for comfort most of the year, but when it comes time to compete, it's the horns that come into play. Only males have horns, which are thick, ridged, and slightly translucent, often with a honey-coloured glow in the sunlight. These are used in head-to-head battles with other males to establish dominance and win the right to mate. The fights can be intense, but the real battle for males comes afterward. After the rut, many males are so exhausted from competition and mating that large numbers of them simply die off, leaving the females to raise the next generation. The young saiga are born in spring, typically in May. Females usually give birth to twins, which is relatively rare among large herbivores, and an adaptation to help replenish populations that are frequently hit hard by predation and environmental challenges. The calves are up and walking within hours, and within a few days they can keep up with the herd. Fast growth is essential on the steppe, where lingering too long in one place could mean a visit from wolves, eagles, or humans. And that brings us to the saiga's more recent history, which has been marked by tragedy and astonishing comebacks. Once found in the millions, saiga populations have plummeted over the last few decades. In the 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union led to a breakdown in conservation enforcement across Central Asia. Poaching skyrocketed, driven by demand for saiga horn in traditional medicine, especially in China, where it's used as a substitute for rhino horn. The market value of the horn, coupled with the collapse of economic structures in rural communities, led to widespread hunting. By the early 2000s, saiga numbers had declined by over 95%, making it one of the fastest population collapses ever recorded in a large mammal. Conservationists feared extinction was imminent, but thanks to international cooperation, local engagement and a few timely interventions, the saiga began to recover. Protected areas were established, anti-poaching patrols were organised, and awareness campaigns helped reduce demand for saiga products. By the 2010s, populations in Kazakhstan had begun to rebound, with herds numbering in the hundreds of thousands once again. Just when things were looking up, nature dealt another cruel blow. In 2015, a mysterious bacterial outbreak swept through one of the largest saiga herds in Kazakhstan during the calving season. Within a matter of days, over 200,000 animals died, roughly 60% of the global population at the time. The culprit was identified as Pasteurella multocida, a bacterium that normally lives harmlessly in the respiratory tract of saiga. For reasons still not fully understood, possibly a combination of heat, humidity and physiological stress, the bacteria turned virulent, causing fatal blood poisoning. It was a shocking reminder of how fragile even a recovering population can be, and how dependent wildlife is on both stable ecosystems and a bit of luck. Since then, conservation efforts have intensified, and once again the saiga are making a slow, tentative comeback. New technologies like satellite tracking and drone surveillance are helping scientists monitor herds and poachers alike. Community-led conservation programs are also playing a role, offering incentives for local people to protect rather than exploit these remarkable animals. While the saiga may not be as well known as elephants, tigers, or polar bears, its story is just as compelling. It's an animal that looks like it belongs in a storybook, but lives in a very real and often perilous world. Its strange appearance is not a fluke or a joke by nature. It's the result of millions of years of careful tuning to one of the most extreme environments on the planet. And it's not just the nose. Everything about the saiga is a study in efficiency. The way it migrates to follow rainfall and grazing cycles. The way it gives birth to twins to offset high mortality. The way it uses social structures to navigate the sprawling, dangerous openness of its habitat. It's not the biggest, fastest, or fiercest animal on the steppe, but it's survived ice ages, invasions, and pandemics, both natural and human-made. In many ways, the saiga is a symbol of resilience. Not resilience in the blockbuster movie sense, where everything ends with a dramatic explosion, but in the quiet, patient way that nature often favours. It stumbles, it adapts, it finds a way to carry on. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about strength. It's often about being weird in exactly the right way. So yes, it has a big nose, a very big, floppy, vaguely ridiculous-looking nose. But that nose is a brilliant adaptation to the world it lives in. It filters, warms, cools, and perhaps even serves as a kind of social signal. It may not win any beauty contests, but it wins the only one that really matters, the contest for survival. And in a world where more and more creatures are being pushed to the edge, the saiga's strange face, peering out over the endless plains, reminds us just how precious and precarious that victory can be. Floating just beneath the sunlit surface of the world's warmest oceans is a creature so small, so beautifully strange, that it looks like it might be the final design of a fantasy video game boss. It goes by the name Glaucus atlanticus, but you might know it better as the blue dragon. It's a sea slug, but not the kind you would expect to find inching its way along rocks or clinging quietly to seaweed. No, this one flips the sea slug stereotype on its head, literally. It drifts upside down, open to the sky above and the deep blue below, wearing an iridescent cloak of shimmering silver and blue, and wielding some of the most ruthless weaponry the ocean can offer. To understand the blue dragon's oddity, you first have to accept that it's a nudibranch, a type of soft-bodied marine mollusk. Most nudibranchs spend their lives crawling along coral reefs or rocky outcrops, munching on sponges or bryozoans. But Glaucus atlanticus is a pelagic species, meaning it lives in the open ocean, far from the comfort of the seabed. It spends its life floating on the surface, belly up, carried along by the currents and the wind, completely at the mercy of the tides. But don't mistake its passive drifting for vulnerability. The blue dragon is armed and dangerous. It's one of the few animals that not only survives contact with the venomous Portuguese man-o'-war, it actively seeks it out. The man-o'-war is infamous for its long, stinging tentacles, which can deliver painful, sometimes medically significant stings to humans. But to the blue dragon, the man-o'-war is both dinner and defense system. Using tiny sharp jaws, the blue dragon bites off chunks of the tentacles and digests the soft tissues, but it doesn't destroy the stinging cells, known as nematocysts. Instead, it harvests them. Through a process called kleptocnidy, the blue dragon selectively stores the intact stinging cells in specialized sacs within its own serrata, the finger-like appendages that line its body like a spiky cape. These serrata become living weapons, filled with ready-to-fire venom originally produced by another animal. And here's the kicker. The sting delivered by the blue dragon can actually be more potent than the original man-o'-wars. That's because the sea slug concentrates the most powerful stinging cells, turning its serrata into highly efficient delivery systems. It's as if someone found a grenade, disassembled it, and built a laser-guided missile out of the parts. But its adaptations don't stop with weaponry. The blue dragon's coloration is another marvel of evolution. Its belly, which faces upward toward the surface, is a brilliant silvery blue that blends in with the water and reflects the sunlight, helping to camouflage it from predators flying overhead like seabirds. Meanwhile, its dorsal side, the part facing downward, is a deeper blue with darker streaks, making it hard to see from below against the backdrop of the ocean depths. This type of camouflage is known as countershading, and it's common in marine animals, though rarely as stylish as this. Despite its name, the blue dragon is quite small. Most adults are just about an inch long, though their long charata make them appear larger and more dramatic. They don't swim in the traditional sense. Instead, they float using an air-filled sac inside their bodies, which keeps them buoyant. They don't control their direction. They're at the mercy of the sea, drifting with the currents, sometimes gathering in groups of hundreds or even thousands in what can only be described as a floating armada of miniature sea dragons. When food is scarce, these floating colonies can turn on one another. Blue dragons are not above a bit of cannibalism. It's a rough world out there on the high seas, and if your neighbour happens to be a tasty blue slug packed with stolen venom, well, survival is survival. Their diet primarily consists of siphonophores like the Portuguese man-o'-war, as well as other venomous sea creatures such as blue buttons and the by-the-wind sailor. These organisms are part of a floating community of creatures known as the Neuston, organisms that live at the ocean's surface, often blown around by the wind and washed ashore in huge numbers after storms. You've probably seen their translucent, balloon-like forms on beaches if you've ever walked along a coastline after a strong wind. And if you looked closely, maybe you saw a tiny flash of metallic blue nearby. That was the blue dragon, riding the same currents as its prey. Because they drift so near the surface, blue dragons are occasionally washed ashore, especially after storms. Their striking appearance often draws curious beachgoers, but handling them is not advised. Even though they're small, their sting can cause painful welts and intense irritation, particularly for those with sensitive skin or allergic reactions. The concentrated nematocysts they carry are not something to take lightly, despite their tiny size. The reproductive strategy of blue dragons is another peculiar detail. Like many nudibranchs, they are simultaneous hermaphrodites, meaning each individual has both male and female reproductive organs. When two meet, they exchange sperm and both lay eggs, which are deposited on floating debris, pieces of driftwood, or even the corpses of their prey. The eggs hatch into tiny planktonic larvae that eventually grow into miniature versions of the adult form. There's no parental care. The young are immediately on their own, set adrift like their parents in the vast blue highway of the ocean. Scientists are still learning about these remarkable creatures. Their small size and transient oceanic lifestyle make them difficult to study in the wild, and their delicate bodies don't always fare well in captivity. Nevertheless, their striking appearance and unusual behaviours have made them a subject of fascination in marine biology. They are reminders that evolution doesn't just happen in the forests or coral reefs. Sometimes it unfolds in the thin, shimmering layer between sea and sky, where danger floats and strategy is everything. One of the most poetic things about the blue dragon is how it embodies the ocean's contradictions. It is delicate and deadly, beautiful and ruthless, passive in its movement, but active in its predation. It rides the wind but chooses its prey with deadly precision. It steals its weapons from others, then refines them into something even more dangerous. It is a creature of paradox, of drifting warfare, of passive aggression turned into biological elegance. They've also captured the human imagination in ways few sea slugs ever could. Their name alone, Blue Dragon, evokes images of fantasy, of winged serpents and magical battles, and visually they don't disappoint. With their electric colours and windswept shapes, they look like tiny aerial acrobats frozen in a moment of grace, trailing their venomous tassels behind them as they dance on the waves. Yet for all their mythical charm, blue dragons serve very real ecological roles. By preying on large stinging plankton, they help control the populations of animals that might otherwise overrun surface waters. They're a small but critical piece of the marine food web, operating in a niche so specific and unusual that few other creatures can replace them. Their very existence challenges our assumptions about what sea life should be. We think of sea slugs as bottom dwellers. We imagine predators as strong swimmers. We picture danger in big packages. But the blue dragon says otherwise. It's tiny, soft-bodied, slow-moving, and absolutely formidable. In the end, Glaucus atlanticus is a reminder that the ocean is not just deep, it's strange. That its surface, so easily mistaken for a tranquil boundary, is in fact teeming with complex dramas, floating stingers, and wandering dragons. That sometimes the most unexpected creatures are the most extraordinary. And that nature, in its quiet, drifting way, still has more imagination than we could ever dream. In the heart of the African wetlands, where the papyrus reeds sway gently in the breeze and crocodiles glide silently beneath the surface, a curious figure stands completely still, its piercing eyes trained forward with monk-like focus. It's tall, it's broad, it's cloaked in bluish-grey feathers, and it has a face that looks like someone crossed a dinosaur with a disgruntled librarian. This is the shoebill stork, a bird that seems equal parts majestic and mildly annoyed, and whose very presence inspires both awe and a little nervous laughter. Let's talk about that face. The shoebill stork is named, quite literally, for its massive shoe-shaped bill. It's not a poetic metaphor. It really does look like an old Dutch clog stuck to the front of its head. This bill is enormous, easily spanning over 7 inches in length and more than 4 inches wide, making it one of the most disproportionately large beaks among all birds. And while it may look a bit silly at first glance, it is in fact a brutally effective hunting tool. The edges of the bill are sharp, and near the tip is a small hook, perfect for gripping and piercing slippery prey. The shoebill doesn't peck politely at seeds or berries like many of its stork cousins. No, this bird goes after things that wriggle, splash and bite back. Lungfish, catfish, tilapia, baby crocodiles, and even young monitor lizards are all on the menu. When a shoebill strikes, it does so with alarming speed and precision. It uses a hunting strategy known as collapse feeding, which involves standing perfectly still for long stretches, sometimes hours, until prey swims close enough, and then lunging forward in an explosive downward bill slam that often includes a dramatic splash and a very surprised fish. Despite its long legs and dignified posture, the shoebill is not an especially graceful eater. After capturing its prey, it often tosses the victim into the air, catching it head first to swallow whole. If the catch is large, it may thrash it around to subdue it or even decapitate it to make swallowing easier, and then, as if to punctuate the moment, it sometimes lets out a sound that's been described as somewhere between a machine gun and a pile of wooden planks clapping together. This noise, called bill clattering, is used in both courtship and territorial displays and is usually accompanied by a deep, guttural croak. It's not the most romantic serenade, but in the world of shoebills, it gets the job done. Shoebill storks are found in a narrow band of tropical East Africa, from South Sudan down through Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and into Zambia. They inhabit swamps, marshes, and floodplains, preferring areas with still or slow-moving water. These wetlands are teeming with aquatic life and provide the ideal backdrop for the shoebill's preferred hunting style. The bird's bluish-grey feathers help it blend in with the silvery light of the marshes, especially when it stands still among the reeds, an ability it uses to its full advantage. This stillness is one of the shoebill's defining characteristics. Unlike many large birds that pace or strut or flutter about, the shoebill prefers minimal movement. It will stand motionless for incredible stretches of time, looking almost like a statue. This calm demeanour has led some wildlife photographers to describe photographing a shoebill as waiting for a statue to blink. And when it does move, it does so with slow, deliberate steps, often lifting its legs with exaggerated care, as though it's worried about spilling a glass of water balanced on its head. This stealthy approach is key to the shoebill's success. Lungfish, one of its primary prey items, breathe air and must rise to the surface regularly. The shoebill waits for this moment, then strikes with the timing of a coiled spring. It often hunts alone and defends its territory fiercely, especially during breeding season. Speaking of breeding, the shoebill doesn't rush into family life. Mating pairs are monogamous and usually nest in isolated patches of swamp. They build a large nest platform out of reeds, often hidden deep within the wetland vegetation. The female typically lays 1 to 3 eggs, but in most cases only one chick survives. This isn't necessarily due to resource limitations. Shoebill parents engage in something called obligate siblicide, where the stronger chick will outcompete, or even attack the weaker one. The parents rarely intervene. It's brutal, but it's a common strategy among birds of prey and other species, where energy investment in a single, successful offspring is more efficient than spreading resources thinly across several. The surviving chick receives intensive care from both parents for several months. They regurgitate food, shade the chick from the sun with their wings, and even bring water in their bills to help cool it down. The young shoebill grows quickly, and by the age of 3 or 4 months it's ready to start hunting on its own. However, sexual maturity doesn't occur until about 3 to 4 years of age, and breeding success is relatively low, which makes the species vulnerable to environmental changes. Shoebill populations are currently considered vulnerable. Habitat loss due to agriculture, drainage of wetlands, and human disturbance are significant threats. In some areas, they're also at risk from the illegal pet trade, where their rarity and odd appearance make them a high-value target. Shoebills are protected in many countries, and conservation efforts are underway to preserve their wetland habitats and monitor populations. Their low reproductive rate and specialised habitat requirements mean that even small disturbances can have long-lasting impacts. Culturally, the shoebill has captured a surprising amount of attention. It's become something of an internet celebrity in recent years, thanks to videos showing its intense stare and peculiar movements. Its appearance is undeniably unique. Part bird, part dinosaur, with a large prehistoric bill and eyes that seem to peer directly into your soul. Some people find it unsettling, others are completely captivated. Despite its somewhat stern appearance, the shoebill is not aggressive toward humans unless provoked. In fact, it has a reputation for being curious and even tolerant of respectful observers. In some regions, locals believe it brings good luck to spot one, and its presence is seen as a sign of a healthy wetland. Taxonomically, the shoebill was once considered closely related to storks, but DNA analysis has revealed that it may be more closely related to pelicans. This surprises many, given its very unpelican-like appearance, but biology is full of such strange twists. Its anatomy, behaviour and ecology are all so specialised that it really deserves a category of its own. It's a bird that doesn't quite fit the mould, and that's exactly what makes it so compelling. Watching a shoebill in the wild is like stepping into a prehistoric world. Its ancient gait, its solemn demeanour, and its strange, echoing calls create an atmosphere that feels timeless. It stands alone, unhurried and unbothered, a master of patience and precision. There is no flapping chaos, no urgent pecking or panicked flight. Just a silent hunter with a face that suggests it's already seen everything, and none of it impressed. In a time when the world seems to spin ever faster, the shoebill reminds us of the power of stillness. It doesn't chase or shout or dazzle with colour. It waits, it watches, and when the moment comes, it acts with perfect clarity. In that way, it's not just an oddity, it's a lesson. Wrapped in feathers and balancing on long, slow-moving legs, the shoebill is proof that sometimes the most extraordinary creatures are the ones that stand perfectly still, blinking only when they need to, on a quiet forest floor in New Zealand beneath towering tree ferns and the tangled green of ancient canopies. A bird waddles out into a moonlit clearing. It looks a bit like a mossy bowling ball with wings, though those wings are so tiny and useless that it doesn't even bother to flap them. It is chubby, greenish, and wearing a face that seems to carry a perpetual expression of cheerful confusion. This is the kakapo, a nocturnal, flightless, critically endangered parrot that seems to have misunderstood the assignment of being a bird in every possible way. To be fair, it's not the kakapo's fault. It evolved on islands without mammalian predators, in an ecosystem where flight wasn't necessary and waddling slowly through the underbrush didn't carry the same risks it would elsewhere. For millions of years, New Zealand was a bird's paradise. No foxes, no cats, no stoats, and certainly no humans. In this predator-free world, the kakapo thrived. It became big, it became heavy, and eventually it gave up on flying altogether. Weighing up to 9 pounds, the kakapo is the heaviest parrot on Earth. It's also the only flightless parrot, the only nocturnal parrot, and one of the longest living birds, with lifespans reaching 60 to 90 years. Evolution, it seems, poured all its creativity into this one species. Its name comes from the Maori language and means night parrot, a nod to its nocturnal habits. And while it may not soar through the skies, the kakapo has adapted in other fascinating ways to make up for its grounded lifestyle. First, let's talk about its feathers. Unlike the sleek aerodynamic plumage of flying birds, the kakapo's feathers are soft and fluffy, like the stuffing of a luxurious pillow. This helps it move quietly through the forest at night and insulates it against New Zealand's cooler mountain temperatures. Its colouring, mottled green, yellow and brown, blends seamlessly into the forest floor, making it almost invisible when it freezes in place, which is its preferred method of avoiding detection. It doesn't run, it doesn't fight, it simply becomes a mossy rock and hopes for the best. When it comes to moving, the kakapo is surprisingly agile, on the ground at least. It uses strong legs to walk and climb, and it has large feet with claws suited for gripping tree trunks and branches. In fact, it's a decent climber and can haul itself up into trees to forage or roost, using its beak and claws in tandem like a parrot-powered grappling hook. Coming back down, however, involves a bit of controlled falling, flapping its tiny wings in what can best be described as a hopeful plummet. Despite these endearing oddities, the kakapo's most legendary trait might be its courtship ritual, which takes place during the breeding season every few years, depending on the availability of fruit from the rimu tree. This tree, which produces a large mast crop only once every 2 to 5 years, is closely tied to the reproductive cycle of the kakapo. When the fruiting conditions are right, the males begin an elaborate and bizarre process known as lekking. Each male selects a display site, called a track and bowl system, on the forest floor, which he carefully clears of debris. He then digs shallow bowls into the earth, which help amplify sound. At night, under the cover of darkness, he begins to emit a deep, resonant, booming call, which sounds less like a bird and more like someone playing a tuba very slowly from a long distance. The call can carry up to 3 miles through the forest and continues night after night for weeks on end. After booming, the males may switch to a higher-pitched ching call, and the entire performance can last up to 8 hours each night. All of this is done in the hope of attracting a female. The females who do not participate in the booming wander between lek sites and inspect the males. If a female is impressed, she mates with one male, just once, and then disappears to raise her chick alone. The male, having performed like an overworked feathery didgeridoo for an entire season, gets no parental role whatsoever. It's an exhausting ritual that relies on sound, stamina, and a forest acoustics degree. Once a female lays her eggs, usually 1 to 3 per clutch, she incubates them alone for about 30 days and raises the chicks with incredible care. She feeds them regurgitated food collected from a variety of fruits, leaves and seeds. But rimu fruit is especially important for chick growth and survival. The chicks are soft and grey and grow slowly, often remaining with their mother for several months before becoming fully independent. Unfortunately, while the kakapo's evolutionary journey created a bird with a unique and charming set of traits, it also made it disastrously unprepared for modern threats. When humans arrived in New Zealand, they brought with them dogs, cats, rats and stoats, none of which the kakapo had ever evolved to deal with. Its freeze-in-place defense, once brilliant against eagles and owls, became tragically ineffective against scent-driven mammalian predators. By the 1970s, the kakapo was thought to be extinct on the mainland. Conservationists began to search remote islands for survivors, and against all odds they found a few. Operation Recovery swung into action. Over the decades, the Department of Conservation in New Zealand, along with Maori communities and conservation groups, initiated one of the most intensive and carefully managed species recovery programs in the world. Today, the kakapo population remains small but is slowly climbing, with just over 250 individuals as of recent counts. Every bird has a name, a microchip, and a genetic profile. Conservationists monitor each one closely, track their movements, manage their health, and even intervene during breeding season by hand-rearing chicks, collecting sperm for artificial insemination, and checking nest cameras daily for problems. It's conservation at its most detailed and hands-on, like running a daycare centre, veterinary hospital, and matchmaking service all rolled into one. Technology plays a key role. Radio telemetry collars, infrared nest cameras, artificial incubation units, and even genome sequencing are employed to ensure that every chick has the best possible chance. Genetic diversity is a major concern, since the current population descends from a small pool of ancestors, so breeding is carefully planned to avoid inbreeding. And yet, despite the challenges, the kakapo endures. It waddles on, it climbs trees with its claws and flaps its useless wings with determination. It booms from forest clearings like a lonely foghorn, hoping to woo a mate with the bass line of its soul. And it charms absolutely everyone who meets it. Researchers, conservationists, volunteers, and anyone lucky enough to watch its gentle, bumbling journey through the underbrush. What makes the kakapo so beloved is more than just its rarity. It's the combination of eccentric traits. A parrot that doesn't fly, a male that sings for months on end with no guarantee of success, a creature whose best defense is to stand very, very still and hope no one notices. It's a bird that by all logic shouldn't still exist, and yet it does, thanks to an enormous amount of human effort and a great deal of good fortune. In a world of fast-paced predators and flashy high-performance animals, the kakapo reminds us that slowness can be a survival strategy too, when paired with the right environment, a dedicated support team, and just a bit of luck. It's a story of persistence, of adaptation in the face of enormous odds, and of what can happen when people come together to save something truly strange and wonderful. The kakapo doesn't soar above the trees or race through the skies. Instead, it pads along the mossy ground with an awkward gait and an ancient lineage, carrying the quiet echo of a prehistoric world. And in doing so, it gives us something rare, a glimpse into a different way of being. A reminder that not all birds are meant to fly, some are just meant to be. In the high-altitude lakes of the Andes, nestled among rugged mountain peaks and icy winds, lives a bird that seems to defy logic and biology in equal measure. It's not flashy. It doesn't soar with grace or dazzle with colour. In fact, it mostly just sits, and sits, and sometimes builds a floating nest the size of a dining room table. This is the giant coot, an unusual name for an unusual bird, whose entire existence seems built around being surprisingly heavy, surprisingly sedentary, and surprisingly good at surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. To start with, giant coots are big. While the word coot might conjure images of small, scuttling pond birds with a vaguely comedic energy, the giant coot is the heavyweight of the family. Adults can weigh up to 10 pounds, making them several times larger than your average Eurasian or American coot. And unlike most water birds, which aim to stay as light as possible to aid in flight, the giant coot leans into its heft. In fact, many individuals are so heavy that they become effectively flightless as adults. Once they've reached a certain mass, they're no longer able to take off and fly through the air, but that doesn't seem to bother them in the slightest. They're quite content on foot or afloat, They live in the Altiplano, the high plains of South America that stretch through Bolivia, Peru, Chile and Argentina, where oxygen levels are low, temperatures swing dramatically between day and night, and everything moves just a bit more slowly. At these elevations, most birds would struggle just to breathe, but the giant coot is perfectly at home here, thriving in chilly, windswept lakes surrounded by sparse grasses and thin mountain air. While many animals migrate to avoid these extremes, the giant coot hunkers down and gets comfortable. One of the most fascinating aspects of this bird's behaviour is its architecture. Giant coots build enormous nests, massive floating structures made of aquatic vegetation like reeds and grasses. These nests can be over 6 feet across and weigh hundreds of pounds. If you've ever seen a floating garden bed, you're in the right ballpark. These platforms serve as both nesting sites and daytime lounges. Pairs will defend their floating estates from rivals with enthusiasm, flapping wings, honking loudly, and shoving with their hefty bodies. Giant coots are monogamous, forming long-term pair bonds. Both parents participate in building the nest, defending their territory and raising the chicks. The female typically lays 3 to 5 eggs, which are incubated by both parents. Once the chicks hatch, they're precocial, covered in down and ready to start exploring almost immediately. They follow their parents around, peeping softly, and learn how to forage for aquatic plants and small invertebrates. The parents remain attentive and protective, feeding the chicks and keeping them close to the safety of the nest. The bird's coloration is somewhat understated. Slate grey or dark blue-black plumage with a bright red bill and a distinctive yellow shield at the base. The legs and feet are strong and lobed, not webbed, which makes them excellent at paddling through dense vegetation and wading through shallows. Watching a giant coot move can be a study in contradictions. It's both ponderous and purposeful, waddling with confidence, splashing through water with all the subtlety of a bowling ball in a bird bath. Their diet is mostly herbivorous, consisting of aquatic plants, algae, and the occasional invertebrate. They feed by dipping their heads underwater, nibbling on submerged vegetation, or grazing on lake-edge grasses. Because food resources can be patchy at high elevations, coots are opportunistic and adaptable in their foraging habits. They may pull up entire clusters of plants and eat them while drifting lazily across the water on their homemade lily-pad mansions. And yet, for all their seemingly laid-back demeanour, giant coots are not without drama. Territorial disputes can erupt between neighbouring pairs, especially during breeding season. These skirmishes involve aggressive displays, chases, and even physical tussling on the water's surface. Despite their bulk, they're surprisingly agile in a fight, puffing up their bodies, lunging with outstretched necks, and slapping the water with their feet like furious sumo wrestlers in a kiddie pool. Their habitats, while remote, are not immune to human disturbance. Agricultural development, water diversion, and grazing livestock can degrade the wetlands they rely on. Fortunately, many of the lakes where giant coots live are protected either as national parks or ecological reserves, and local conservation groups are working to ensure their long-term survival. In some areas, ecotourism has even brought attention to the species, with birdwatchers hiking high into the mountains for a glimpse of these chunky, noble floaters. What's truly interesting about the giant coot is how it represents a completely different model of survival from what we often expect from birds. Many birds are defined by their ability to fly, light bones, sleek feathers, rapid metabolism. The giant coot, on the other hand, has taken a different path. It has given up flight, at least in part, in favour of stability, strength, and an unhurried lifestyle. It doesn't migrate. It doesn't flee. It stays put, builds a house, and keeps its family warm and well fed on a floating fortress of its own making. And in that way, the giant coot is a kind of quiet revolutionary in the bird world. It challenges the idea that elegance must mean flight, or that survival always demands speed. It's not flashy, it's not fast, but it's tough, it's resourceful, it's comfortable building a life in places where few others dare to settle. And it does all this with the calm, satisfied air of a bird that has figured out what it wants from the world and is getting it, thank you very much. Even their social interactions are fascinating to watch. While pairs are often fiercely territorial, they are also quite neighbourly in non-breeding seasons. Groups of giant coots may gather in loose flocks, foraging together or sunbathing on the shore. They communicate with a series of honks, grunts and growls, none of which are especially melodic, but all of which serve a clear purpose. When a rival approaches, the tone shifts. When a chick calls out for food, the response is immediate. It's a complex language of squawks and shuffles that works just fine for a bird whose life runs on patience and presence. As the seasons shift, giant coots endure the Andean winter with quiet resilience. Snow may blanket the mountains around them, and ice may crust the edges of their lakes. But the coots remain. They don't head for the tropics. They hunker down, fluff up their feathers, and paddle on through the chill, sometimes breaking through thin layers of ice, with their powerful bodies to keep their territories open. The chicks grow, fledge, and in time begin building floating nests of their own. The cycle continues, not in a hurry, not in a rush, just steadily, season by season, generation by generation. And perhaps that's what makes the giant coot so quietly inspiring. It doesn't conquer with brilliance or dazzle with acrobatics. It succeeds through consistency, community, and sheer persistence. In a world that often celebrates the fast and the flamboyant, there's something deeply comforting about the giant coot. It reminds us that there are many ways to thrive, that it's okay to be heavy, to move slowly, to settle down in one spot and make the best of what you've got. That sometimes the best defense isn't flight or speed, but building something solid and holding on to it. The giant coot is not a bird of headlines or viral videos. It's a bird of quiet strength and gentle humour. A reminder that in high places, where oxygen is thin and life is hard, there's still room for the odd, the grounded and the gloriously stubborn. And if you're ever lucky enough to stand beside a high Andean lake and see one of these heavyweights gliding serenely across the water, know that you're looking at a survivor, not of speed or spectacle, but of something rarer still, steadfastness in a world that never stops moving. In the shadowy realms of the ocean, where light fades into blue and pressure builds like the weight of time itself, lives a creature that seems too outrageous to be real. It wears a permanent frown, waddles more than it swims, and hunts using a glowing fishing lure that dangles right from its own head. This is the anglerfish, a deep-sea oddity that looks like it was built from spare parts left over after a particularly surreal dream. There are many species of anglerfish, more than 200 in fact, found in oceans all around the world. Most of them live far below the surface, in what's known as the pelagic zone, roughly 3,000 to 12,000 feet deep, where the sun never shines, and the only light comes from the creatures who carry it themselves. Down here, darkness is not just a backdrop. It's the stage on which evolution has written some of its strangest scripts. Let's start with that famous lure. In many anglerfish species, particularly the females, there's a modified spine called the elysium that extends from the top of the head. At the end of this appendage is the esker, a bioluminescent bulb that glows with a faint ghostly light. This is no accident of biology. It's a highly effective hunting strategy. Small fish and other prey are attracted to the light, mistaking it for food or curiosity, only to be met with a set of needle-like teeth and a lightning-fast gulp. The anglerfish's mouth is large and hinged, capable of opening wide enough to swallow prey nearly as big as itself. And thanks to a distensible stomach, it can digest meals that would leave most animals hopelessly overstuffed. The light itself comes from symbiotic bacteria that live within the esker. These bacteria don't exist in the fish from birth. They must be acquired from the environment early in life. The fish provides shelter and nutrients, and the bacteria provide the glow. It's one of many cases in nature where cooperation leads to innovation, though in this case, the innovation just happens to end with a lot of unsuspecting victims getting eaten. Anglerfish aren't exactly speedy hunters. Their bodies are soft, gelatinous, and poorly suited to swimming quickly. They drift, lurk, and wait, relying on the illusion of harmlessness and a clever trick of light. They don't need to chase their prey, they just need to sit still and let the dinner come to them. It's the biological equivalent of setting out a porch light and waiting for the snacks to arrive. But as strange as their hunting method is, it's nothing compared to their mating strategy. Anglerfish reproduction has become the stuff of biological legend, not because it's romantic, but because it's downright bizarre. In many deep-sea anglerfish species, males are tiny, and not just slightly smaller, often just a fraction of the female size. While a female might reach lengths of 2 feet, a male might only grow to be an inch long. The deep sea is a vast, mostly empty place. Finding a mate is difficult at best, so anglerfish have evolved a solution: permanent attachment. When a male anglerfish finds a female, he bites into her body and releases enzymes that fuse their tissues and circulatory systems. Over time, the male loses his eyes, fins, and most internal organs. He essentially becomes a living sperm factory, wholly dependent on the female for sustenance, permanently grafted to her body. Some females have been found with multiple males attached at once, up to 8 in a few recorded cases. It's not love exactly, it's more like extreme outsourcing. This method of reproduction ensures that when the female is ready to spawn, she has a mate, or several, already on board. In the pitch-black expanse of the ocean depths, this kind of long-term commitment is not just useful, it's essential. Not all anglerfish species go to such extremes. Some shallow water varieties have more conventional mating behaviours and body sizes. But it's the deep-sea dwellers, with their parasitic reproduction and eerie glow, that have captured the imagination of scientists and storytellers alike. Visually, anglerfish range from unsettling to downright terrifying, depending on your perspective. Their bodies are often globular or flattened, with rough, mottled skin and long, spiny fins. Their teeth curve inward, preventing prey from escaping once it's been caught. Their eyes are adapted to low-light conditions, sometimes small and beady, sometimes proportionally large and glassy. And then there's that ever-present expression, a kind of grimace or scowl that makes them look permanently displeased, which, to be fair, is probably how you'd look too if you spent your entire life in darkness, waiting for a snack. Despite their ghastly appearance, anglerfish are delicate creatures. Their gelatinous bodies are adapted to the crushing pressure of the deep sea, and they often do not survive if brought to the surface too quickly. Their tissues rupture, and their swim bladders, if they even have them, malfunction in the absence of deep-sea pressure. This makes studying them a challenge. Much of what we know about their behaviour comes from submersible observations, remotely operated vehicles, and the occasional fortunate or unfortunate specimen captured in a deep-sea trawl. Their role in the ecosystem is important, albeit subtle. As ambush predators, they help maintain the balance of species in the midwater and benthic zones, and as prey for larger deep-sea animals, they're part of a long, mysterious food chain that we're only beginning to understand. The deep sea is Earth's largest habitat, and anglerfish are one of its most recognisable inhabitants, if only because they look like they crawled out of a Tim Burton storyboard and into reality. Bioluminescence is common in the deep ocean, but the anglerfish's use of light is particularly specialised. It doesn't just glow, it weaponises its glow. Other deep-sea creatures use light to communicate, to distract predators, or to find their way. The anglerfish uses it as a trap. And unlike a flashlight which illuminates everything equally, the anglerfish's lure creates contrast. It draws the eye, and therefore the body, of prey right into the predator's jaws. Interestingly, not all anglerfish have lures. In some species, particularly among the more mobile or pelagic types, the lure is reduced or absent. These anglerfish may use other strategies, such as camouflage or stealth, to capture their meals. The diversity of forms within the anglerfish family is enormous. Some are round and squat, others elongated and finned. Some live near the sea floor, others drift in the open water column. It's a classic example of adaptive radiation, a single lineage evolving into many forms to exploit different niches. The evolutionary story of the anglerfish is one of specialization taken to its absolute limit. In the face of darkness, scarcity, and immense pressure, both literal and figurative, these animals have developed bizarre, beautiful workarounds. They've traded mobility for patience, strength for trickery, independence for fusion. In doing so, they've carved out a place in one of the most inhospitable environments on the planet. From a human perspective, it's tempting to see the anglerfish as ugly or grotesque. But viewed through the lens of biology, it's a masterpiece of adaptation. Every protrusion, every tooth, every strange behaviour is the product of millions of years of fine-tuning in a world we can barely begin to comprehend. Where we see menace, nature sees efficiency. And perhaps that's what makes the anglerfish such a compelling symbol. It's the embodiment of life in the extreme. It doesn't shine because it wants to, it shines because it must. In a world without sunlight, it brings its own. Not to guide the way, but to lure what it needs, to survive another day, another meal, another strange journey through the silent, endless dark. It reminds us that evolution isn't always elegant. Sometimes it's weird. Sometimes it's ruthless. Sometimes it hands a creature a glowing antenna, a monstrous grin, and says, "Good luck down there." And the anglerfish, bless it, says, "Challenge accepted." In the sun-bleached savannas and dry thorn bush regions of East Africa, where the landscape stretches out in shimmering waves of gold and dust, there wanders a creature that seems to have tiptoed out of a dream. Slender, poised, and with a neck that gives even giraffes pause, the gerenuk is a masterclass in elegance through adaptation. It looks a bit like someone took an antelope, stretched it carefully like warm toffee, and set it down in a land where the trees tease from just out of reach. The name gerenuk comes from the Somali word garanug, meaning giraffe-necked, which is fitting because its most defining feature is undoubtedly that extraordinarily long neck. But while the resemblance to a miniature giraffe is impossible to ignore, the gerenuk is in a league of its own. It belongs to the antelope subfamily and is most closely related to other gazelle-like species, though it could never be mistaken for your average grass grazer. Gerenuks have evolved an entirely different strategy for survival, one that involves standing upright on their hind legs to reach leaves, flowers and fruit from the lower branches of shrubs and small trees. This upright browsing behaviour is something few other ungulates or hoofed animals attempt. When food is scarce, most antelope drop their heads and nibble whatever is left on the ground. But the gerenuk skips the buffet entirely and heads straight for the higher shelves. It uses its long, slender front legs for balance, propping them up against a branch or trunk, while its powerful hind legs do the heavy lifting. With this clever manoeuvre, it can access a leafy smorgasbord that's out of reach for many of its competitors. The giraffe may tower over the acacia canopy, but the gerenuk rules the mid-range, feeding in that sweet spot between the grasses and the treetops. Everything about the gerenuk's body reflects this specialised feeding habit. The neck, for starters, isn't just long, it's remarkably flexible, giving the animal a wide range of motion while it reaches for food. The legs are long and lean, especially the hind limbs, which are strong enough to support the animal's weight during those vertical foraging sessions. The torso is compact and barrel-shaped, keeping the centre of gravity low and aiding in balance. Even the head is narrow and slightly pointed, allowing the gerenuk to reach between dense thorns and branches without getting snagged. Males and females look similar at first glance, but there are differences. Males are generally larger and sport a pair of robust, lyre-shaped horns that curve backward in a gentle arc. These horns are used in ritualized battles during the mating season, with contests usually settled through posturing and strength, rather than outright violence. The males also have a more muscular neck, nature's way of compensating for the added weight of the horns, and perhaps also for their occasional headbutting competitions. The gerenuk's coloration is understated but beautiful. Its coat is a warm, tawny brown with a reddish hue along the back and lighter, almost creamy underparts. The face is delicately marked with white rings around the eyes and a narrow white stripe running from the nose to the forehead. The large expressive eyes and oversized ears give it a perpetually alert appearance, as if it's always listening for whispers in the wind. And it usually is. Predators like lions, cheetahs and hyenas are a constant threat in its arid homeland. Unlike many antelope species that form large herds, gerenuks are more solitary and selective. Females tend to form small groups with their offspring, while adult males are more likely to be found alone, patrolling a territory or shadowing a group of females during the breeding season. These territories are marked with scent from preorbital glands near the eyes, and occasionally reinforced through sparring with rival males. It's not a high-drama social scene. Gerenuks live relatively quiet lives, focused on survival, browsing, and keeping one cautious eye on the horizon. One of the most remarkable things about the gerenuk is how little water it actually needs to drink. In a landscape where waterholes can be few and far between, this is a huge evolutionary advantage. The gerenuk gets nearly all of the moisture it requires from its food, lush leaves, succulent stems, and the occasional fallen fruit. It doesn't need to travel far or take risky trips to water sources that might be stalked by predators. Instead, it stays close to dense thickets and bushland, where food and cover are often one and the same. This ability to thrive in arid environments has allowed the gerenuk to carve out a niche in places that would be challenging for more water-dependent grazers. From the dry scrublands of southern Ethiopia to the acacia savannas of northern Kenya and eastern Tanzania, the gerenuk adapts to its surroundings with quiet efficiency. It's not flashy, and it rarely makes headlines, but it's an ecological success story nonetheless. Reproduction is a relatively straightforward affair in the gerenuk's world. After mating, the female carries her single offspring for about 7 months, before giving birth in a secluded, sheltered area. The young fawn is born fully furred, with its eyes open, and within a few hours it's capable of standing. Still, it stays hidden for the first few weeks of life, lying low in the grass while its mother returns periodically to nurse and check on it. This strategy helps protect the fawn from predators during its most vulnerable stage. Once it's strong enough, it joins its mother and begins learning the art of browsing and upright balancing. Over time, young males will drift away to establish their own territories, while young females may stick closer to their mother's home range. There's not a lot of dramatic migration or long-distance movement in the gerenuk's lifestyle, just slow, steady adaptation to a demanding environment, one leafy branch at a time. From an evolutionary perspective, the gerenuk is a fascinating example of how form follows function. While giraffes evolved massive size to reach the treetops and elephants use their trunks like articulated arms, the gerenuk took a different path, one that required precision engineering rather than brute strength. It didn't grow taller exactly, but it grew longer and leaner. It didn't sprint or leap its way to food, but instead stood tall on tiptoes and outlasted the rest. Its evolutionary path, while not as dramatic as the towering giraffes, is no less elegant. It demonstrates that sometimes the best solutions are subtle. In an environment where resources are scarce and survival depends on innovation, the gerenuk's vertical reach is a quiet triumph. Despite its adaptations, the gerenuk faces threats from habitat loss, hunting and human encroachment. Its population has declined in some areas, though it remains relatively stable in others. Conservation efforts are underway to protect its remaining habitat and to better understand its role in the broader ecosystem. Like so many specialized species, the gerenuk's future is closely tied to the preservation of the landscape it calls home. Seeing a gerenuk in the wild is a special kind of magic. It stands there, poised on its hind legs, reaching delicately into the leaves like a ballet dancer mid-pirouette. There's no rushing, no crashing through the underbrush. Just stillness, grace, and the quiet rhythm of survival. It's not the most famous antelope, nor the fastest, nor the most flamboyant. But in the world of nature's oddities, the gerenuk earns its place with style. It reminds us that evolution isn't always about grandeur. It's also about finesse. It's about finding a way to reach what others can't, adapting to live where others won't, and doing it all with the kind of understated poise that makes you stop and wonder how such a creature came to be. In the great theatre of the African wilderness, the gerenuk doesn't clamour for the spotlight. It doesn't roar, stampede, or strut. It simply rises on slender legs, stretches that impossibly long neck toward a dangling acacia leaf, and takes one quiet bite. And in that moment, it tells a story millions of years in the making, one of balance, ingenuity, and the subtle art of standing tall. Beneath the cold, dark waters off the coast of Iceland, buried in the sandy seabed like a secret, lives one of the longest-lived animals ever discovered. It's not a whale or a turtle or a deep-sea fish with a glow stick for a nose. It's a clam, a small, unassuming bivalve with a round, ridged shell, and a name that sounds like it belongs more in a Roman senate than a muddy seafloor, Arctica islandica. But this humble creature, about the size of your palm, holds one of nature's most astonishing records. It can live for more than 5 centuries. That's not a typo. Not decades, centuries. One individual clam, later nicknamed Ming, was dredged up by researchers in 2006 and upon analysis was revealed to be more than 500 years old. It was born during the early Renaissance, around the time Michelangelo was chiselling David, and Henry VII was ruling England. By the time it was discovered, it had lived through the rise and fall of empires, the invention of the printing press, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the invention of the telephone, and the birth of the internet. And yet it sat in the mud, silent, patient, just filtering water, layering on shell material one microscopic ring at a time. The longevity of Arctica islandica is extraordinary, but even more remarkable is how scientists can actually read its age, much like the rings of a tree. Each year, the clam adds a new growth ring to its shell. These rings are not just pretty patterns, they're natural timestamps, microscopic lines laid down annually as the clam grows during the warmer months and rests in the colder ones. By counting and measuring these rings, scientists can determine the exact age of the clam, and, more importantly, learn about the environment in which it lived. You see, each ring doesn't just say year 1, year 2, year 3. It also captures information about water temperature, salinity, and even levels of certain trace elements or isotopes. This means that by examining the shells of long-lived clams, researchers can essentially rewind the ocean's history year by year, like flipping through pages of an exceptionally slow-moving diary. The field that studies these rings is known as sclerochronology. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it works like dendrochronology, the science of dating events and climate changes through tree rings. Shells, like trees, hold environmental data in their growth patterns. The thickness of the rings can indicate years of abundance or stress. Variations in oxygen isotopes can suggest temperature changes. Together, these clues allow scientists to reconstruct past climates, especially in places where no written or ice core records exist. This has proven invaluable in understanding the North Atlantic climate system, one of the engines of Earth's weather and ocean circulation. Arctica islandica lives in the subarctic waters around Iceland, the British Isles, and the east coast of North America, key locations for monitoring the behaviour of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, a complex system of currents that influences everything from hurricane patterns to European winters. The clams have essentially become underwater historians, recording changes long before we had satellites or thermometers. They've also offered insight into just how dramatically the climate has changed in recent centuries. Some specimens reveal periods of cooling during the so-called Little Ice Age, a period of lower than average temperatures from the 14th to 19th centuries. Others show more recent warming trends, suggesting that modern changes in ocean temperature and chemistry are unprecedented in both scale and speed compared to the past half-millennium. But let's return to Ming, the famous clam. Ming earned its name because it was born in 1499 during the Ming dynasty in China. It was collected as part of a research effort to better understand marine climate records, and it wasn't until scientists began analysing its shell in detail that they realised just how old it was. There's some poetic irony in the fact that they had to section the shell, essentially ending its life, to uncover the full truth. No one expected a clam to have quietly witnessed 507 years of history. That clam's story sparked fascination and a wave of curiosity. How do clams live so long? What keeps their cells from degrading like ours do? Why don't they get old in the same way? The answer, as with most biological puzzles, is complex. Arctica islandica appears to have several strategies for avoiding or delaying senescence, the gradual deterioration associated with aging. For starters, it has a very slow metabolism. Cold water, low food availability, and a sedentary lifestyle all contribute to the clam's glacial pace of life. This low-energy approach means fewer cellular divisions, less wear and tear, and lower levels of damaging metabolic byproducts like free radicals. Its cells also show high levels of stability over time. There's little sign of accumulated cellular damage, and the usual hallmarks of aging, like protein misfolding, DNA damage, or oxidative stress, are kept remarkably low. Some studies have even suggested that the clam's mitochondria, the energy-producing structures in cells, are unusually efficient, producing less damaging waste than those in most other animals. Another factor might be its shell itself. The shell offers physical protection not just from predators, but also from environmental stresses like UV radiation or fluctuating temperatures. It's a bit like living in a permanent bunker, a safe, stable space that shields the body from a chaotic world. Despite all of this, the clam is not immortal in the strictest sense. It can die from disease, predation, or environmental changes. But in the absence of such forces, its natural life expectancy stretches out into centuries, an astonishing feat for a creature so small and seemingly unremarkable. What's perhaps most humbling about the clam is how much it reminds us that longevity and intelligence aren't necessarily linked. Ming the clam didn't build cities, write novels, or invent spacecraft. It just lived. Quietly. Patiently. It did what clams do best. Filtered water, grew slowly, avoided unnecessary risks. And in doing so, it outlived empires, witnessed the birth of nations, and kept a record of the seas while history marched by above. There's something comforting about that. In a world obsessed with speed, youth, and productivity, the clam is a quiet counterpoint. It suggests that there's value in stillness, in patience, in long, slow accumulation. It also serves as a powerful reminder that some of the most important environmental records are written not in books or databases, but in the bodies of living organisms, layered in shell, etched in bone, frozen in ice. The legacy of Arctica islandica continues. Scientists are still studying living clams to refine their understanding of marine chronology, climate variability, and aging biology. Each shell, alive or dead, adds another data point to the timeline. With careful collection and analysis, researchers hope to build uninterrupted records going back 1,000 years or more. That's a millennium of data, contained in the shells of creatures that ask for nothing more than quiet sand and cold water. They don't advertise their brilliance. They don't flash or sing or leap, but they endure, and in enduring, they teach us. Ming may have been the oldest clam discovered so far, but others are out there, still filtering, still growing, still writing their slow, steady history of the ocean, one ring at a time, deep in the steamy mangrove forests and tangled riverine jungles. Of Borneo lives a primate so unusual in appearance that it seems like a character from a lost Monty Python sketch. This creature wears a permanently perplexed expression, sports a potbelly worthy of a retired sumo wrestler, and most famously boasts a nose so large and pendulous that it practically demands its own zip code. Meet the proboscis monkey, Nassalis laveatus, an animal that has been described as ridiculous, endearing, comical, and surprisingly highly evolved. Let's address the elephant, or perhaps the banana in the room, that nose. On adult males, the nose can grow to such impressive dimensions that it flops over the mouth like a drooping crimson teardrop. It jiggles when they run. It bounces when they eat. It even amplifies their calls. To the uninitiated, it looks like the result of a caricature gone slightly out of control. But this impressive nasal appendage is no accident. It's the product of sexual selection, that evolutionary engine that drives creatures to develop seemingly impractical traits in the name of reproductive success. In the world of the proboscis monkey, a big nose means you're a big deal. The larger the nose, the more likely a male is to dominate a harem of females. That prominent proboscis is thought to function both as a visual signal and an acoustic enhancer. Males use deep, resonant honking calls to assert dominance, warn rivals, and attract mates, and their oversized schnoz helps modify and project these vocalizations. In other words, the nose is both megaphone and billboard, an all-in-one marketing campaign for masculinity. Interestingly, the males with the largest noses also tend to have larger testes and higher testosterone levels, linking nose size directly to reproductive fitness. Females, for their part, seem to prefer these well-endowed gentlemen, choosing them not just for their hooting voices, but for the overall air of robustness that a good nose implies. Evolution has effectively taken one facial feature and turned it into a dating app profile picture. Loud, noticeable, and very hard to ignore. Female proboscis monkeys also have enlarged noses, though not to the same extravagant degree. Their noses are more of a delicate scoop than a dangling appendage, but they still stand out among primates. The shared nasal flare may aid in social communication, scent signalling, or simply be a genetic tag-along from the male-driven selection process. But noses aside, the proboscis monkey has many other quirks worth admiring. For starters, it's uniquely adapted to life in a wet, swampy world. Unlike most primates, which favour forests and mountainous regions, proboscis monkeys thrive in coastal mangroves, freshwater swamps, and along muddy riverbanks. This semi-aquatic lifestyle is rare among primates, and it requires a set of adaptations that would be deeply impractical for a tree-dwelling gibbon or a forest-dwelling macaque. One such adaptation is their partially webbed feet. These help them swim, yes, swim, with remarkable efficiency. In fact, proboscis monkeys are among the best swimmers in the primate world, capable of crossing wide rivers and swimming underwater for significant distances. Their long limbs and webbed toes allow them to navigate floodplains, escape predators, and access distant food sources with surprising grace, even if their belly-forward profile gives the impression of a floating pool toy. And about that belly, it's not just for show. The proboscis monkey is a foregut fermenter, which means it has a multi-chambered stomach similar to that of a cow. This complex digestive system is filled with specialized microbes that break down the tough cellulose found in the leaves, seeds, and unripe fruits that make up the bulk of its diet. Fermentation allows them to extract nutrients from fibrous plant matter that most animals would find indigestible. However, this efficient digestion comes at a price. The fermentation process produces gas, lots of it, hence the monkey's round, bloated appearance. It's not fat so much as a perpetual bloat from constant microbial feasting. The trade-off is a slow digestive process and a low-energy lifestyle. Proboscis monkeys spend much of their time resting, digesting, and occasionally belching politely in the jungle breeze. Their social lives are built around harem groups, usually consisting of one dominant male and a small group of females with their offspring. These groups are fluid, sometimes joining with other harems to form larger troops of up to 60 individuals. Males that don't control a harem live in bachelor groups, biding their time, testing the waters, and occasionally challenging harem leaders for control. These challenges are often more theatrical than violent, involving vocal contests, branch shaking, and displays of size rather than actual combat. It's more operatic than gladiatorial. Communication among proboscis monkeys is rich and varied. They vocalize with honks, grunts, and wheezes. They flash facial expressions, shake branches, and even slap the water when alarmed. Their social bonds are maintained through grooming and gentle contact, especially between mothers and infants. Babies are born with a dark coat and a tiny button-like nose that gradually grows and lightens in colour as they age. Juveniles are curious and playful, often seen swinging clumsily through the trees or engaging in mock chases along riverbanks. Despite their adaptations, proboscis monkeys are facing increasing threats. Their habitats, lowland mangroves and swamp forests, are among the most endangered ecosystems in Southeast Asia. Logging, palm oil plantations, and human settlement have carved away large swaths of the monkey's range. Because they depend on a very specific habitat, they're particularly vulnerable to environmental disruption. The monkey's gut, for instance, takes days to adjust to dietary changes, so they can't simply switch to new foods when their usual sources disappear. Habitat fragmentation not only limits their food supply, but also isolates populations, making reproduction and genetic diversity more difficult to maintain. Conservation efforts are underway in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, where protected areas and ecotourism initiatives aim to preserve their habitats and raise awareness. Proboscis monkeys are listed as endangered, and their charismatic appearance makes them ideal ambassadors for swamp forest conservation. After all, it's hard to forget a monkey that looks like it's perpetually in mid-sneeze. Their place in local culture is equally intriguing. In some regions, proboscis monkeys are nicknamed Dutch monkeys, a reference, depending on whom you ask, to colonial-era settlers whose large noses and round bellies bore an unfortunate resemblance to the local fauna. While the term is outdated and a bit cheeky, it reflects how the monkey's appearance has etched itself into the cultural imagination. The proboscis monkey is a living contradiction, awkward yet graceful, funny-looking yet highly specialised, sluggish in movement but swift in water. It's a case study in how evolution doesn't always favour the sleek or the swift. Sometimes it rewards the peculiar. In a world where survival often means fitting into a very specific niche, the proboscis monkey has leaned fully into being the weirdest kid in class, and it's thriving because of it. And while it might be tempting to think of it as a punchline, the proboscis monkey is no joke. It's a marvel of natural engineering. Its enormous nose, awkward body shape, and elaborate digestive system all serve a purpose. Evolution has sculpted it not for elegance, but for effectiveness. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to outlast the competition, win the attention of a few admirers, and stay afloat in the swamp, so the next time you find yourself giggling at a photo of a pot-bellied monkey with a comically large nose, remember, that nose is a badge of honour. That belly is a biome. That face, wrinkled, wide-eyed and unforgettable, is the result of millions of years of adaptation to a life that most creatures couldn't begin to handle. In the grand parade of animal oddities, the proboscis monkey marches to the beat of its own honk. Not flashy, not sleek, but deeply and wonderfully itself. An awkward masterpiece in a world that often forgets how much brilliance can be hidden behind a funny face. In the damp, misty forests of Central and South America, where clouds drift through treetops and the nights hum with 1,000 tiny voices, there exists a creature so delicate, so ethereal, that it seems like it was dreamed into being. Perched on a leaf glistening with rain, it might not catch your eye right away. It's green, like the leaf, tiny, barely 2 inches long. But look closer and you'll see why this little frog has earned such fascination. Beneath its pale, lime-coloured skin lies a body you can see straight through. Beating heart, winding intestines, liver, bones, blood vessels, the whole quiet machinery of life on full display. Meet the glass frog, nature's see-through marvel. The glass frog isn't a single species, but rather a family of around 150 known species, all belonging to the family Centrolenidae. They inhabit the humid lowland rainforests and cloud forests stretching from southern Mexico to parts of Bolivia and Venezuela, often near fast-flowing streams and rivers. These frogs are nocturnal, secretive, and surprisingly elusive for something that's partially invisible. During the day, they rest on the undersides of leaves, blending in so thoroughly that even the most attentive predator or biologist might pass them by. What makes the glass frog so mesmerizing is its transparency. In many species, particularly those in the genus Hyalinobertrachium, the skin on the belly is completely see-through, revealing not just hints or shadows, but full anatomical details. You can see the liver, sometimes tinged with pale yellow. You can watch the gut coil like a delicate string of pearls. Most arrestingly, you can see the frog's tiny heart beating rhythmically inside its chest. An astonishing sight that feels both intimate and otherworldly. The rest of the body is semi-translucent as well, with varying degrees of opacity. The back is usually a soft, vibrant green, sometimes dotted with tiny yellow or white spots. This coloration provides excellent camouflage when viewed from above, mimicking the appearance of mossy or sun-dappled leaves. But from below, where many predators, like snakes, birds, or even aquatic insects, might spot a frog silhouetted against the sky, the clear belly offers an entirely different kind of defense. This is where things get even more interesting. You might think that transparency would be an unusual or ineffective defense in a rainforest setting, but it turns out to be a brilliant solution to a common problem. In the dappled light of a forest canopy, with shadows shifting constantly and surfaces reflecting irregularly, a partially transparent body disrupts the visual cues that predators rely on. It breaks up the outline, it reduces contrast. The frog becomes not a shape, but a suggestion of one, soft, ghost-like and easily ignored. This effect is enhanced by the frog's behaviour. Glass frogs are mostly still during the day, choosing leaves that match their green hue and tucking their limbs beneath them to reduce visible shadows. They don't rely on motion to escape detection. Instead, they disappear by simply existing in a state of gentle quiet. At night, when they become more active, they move carefully among the leaves, rarely exposing themselves to open air for more than a moment. But camouflage is only part of the story. The transparency of the glass frog has also become a subject of serious scientific interest, particularly in the field of biophotonics and medical imaging. Researchers are fascinated by how the frog maintains transparency despite having a fully functioning circulatory system. Blood, after all, is opaque and red in most vertebrates. How does the frog keep its blood from ruining the whole illusion? As it turns out, glass frogs have a remarkable trick. When they're resting, they can hide most of their red blood cells inside the liver, where they're stored in tight clusters. This reduces light scattering and helps preserve the see-through effect. When the frog becomes active, the blood cells are released back into circulation. It's a physiological feat no other vertebrate is known to perform in quite the same way. And it may one day offer insights into human medical applications, such as managing blood oxygenation or improving imaging techniques. But let's not get too caught up in the frog's see-through stomach, because there's another layer of wonder here, and it has to do with the way these tiny frogs raise their young. While many amphibians are content to lay their eggs and hop off into the night, some species of glass frog exhibit a level of parental care that's nothing short of touching. Most glass frogs lay their eggs on leaves that hang over streams or rivers. The eggs are jelly-like clusters, translucent and delicate, and the location is strategic. When the tadpoles hatch, they drop directly into the water below, bypassing a hazardous crawl across dry ground. In some species, it's the male who guards the clutch, sometimes for weeks at a time. He'll sit vigilantly on or near the eggs, warding off predators and keeping the cluster moist by rehydrating it with his body, or by strategically positioning himself during rain. This commitment is more than symbolic. Studies have shown that attended clutches are more likely to survive than unattended ones. Males will fan the eggs with their limbs to increase oxygen flow, chase away tiny predators like parasitic flies or wasps, and even inspect the eggs closely for signs of fungus or decay. If an egg begins to fail, the male may nudge it off the leaf to protect the rest of the clutch. In a few rare species, females have been observed caring for their eggs as well, though male care is more common. This level of dedication is impressive, especially for a creature that weighs less than a quarter ounce and lives in a world teeming with dangers. The rainforest doesn't slow down for a frog on parenting duty, but the glass frog still makes the time. Their call is a soft, high-pitched tinkling or peeping sound, difficult to hear over the cacophony of the rainforest at night. Males establish small territories along stream banks and call from the undersides of leaves, hoping to attract a mate. The success of this courtship depends not just on volume, but on persistence and location. A well-positioned male with a prime leaf might call for hours, his tiny body vibrating with effort, all for the chance to pass on his genes and then stay behind to guard them. And while their transparency might seem like the main event, it's just one part of a much larger evolutionary performance. Glass frogs are experts in balance, between visibility and concealment, independence and parental care, fragility and resilience. Their entire existence hinges on being just noticeable enough to attract a mate, but not so noticeable as to end up inside a predator. The rainforests they inhabit are increasingly under threat, from logging, agriculture and climate change. Many glass frog species are already listed as vulnerable or endangered, not because they've changed, but because their world is. Their dependence on pristine, flowing streams and dense forest canopy means they are among the first to suffer when the landscape is altered. Conservation efforts are focusing on preserving these habitats and improving our understanding of the frog's complex ecological roles. They are not just marvels of biology, but indicators of environmental health. Their translucent skin may reveal their own organs, but in a broader sense they reveal the health or sickness of the forest itself. To see a glass frog in the wild is to glimpse something almost magical, a living echo of the leaf it rests on, a pulse of life visible through a chest no thicker than a fingernail. It's a quiet spectacle, requiring stillness, patience, and a bit of luck. But in that moment, watching a tiny heart beat through clear skin, you're reminded just how ingenious and delicate nature can be. In a world full of spectacle and noise, the glass frog whispers its wonders. It doesn't shout, it doesn't leap into view. It simply clings to the underside of a leaf, breathing slowly, showing you everything, and asking for nothing in return. As we reach the end of this gentle journey through evolution's cabinet of curiosities, it's worth pausing to take in the quiet genius of it all. We've wandered through forests where frogs wear their insides on the outside, watched monkeys advertise their charm with oversized noses, and peeked into the life of a clam that quietly recorded half a millennium of Earth's history without ever leaving the sea floor. From transparent skin to inflatable faces, detachable jaws to glow-in-the-dark lures, the animal kingdom has shown us that there's no such thing as a normal design. Nature doesn't follow a rule book. It experiments, adapts, refines, and sometimes, let's be honest, gets wonderfully weird. But in every one of these oddities lies a story of survival, of innovation, of fine-tuned biological problem-solving. Whether it's a giraffe-necked antelope standing on tiptoe in the scrublands, or a sea slug that steals stingers from its prey and turns them into its own defense system, each of these creatures is proof that evolution doesn't aim for beauty in the conventional sense, it aims for function. And sometimes, function just happens to look like a goblin shark or a pancake fish or a bird with a shoe for a face. That's the charm of it. It's easy, sometimes, to dismiss these animals as oddballs or outliers, to chuckle at the proboscis monkey's exaggerated profile or the kakapo's waddling gait. But what if, instead of thinking of them as strange, we reframe that strangeness as brilliance in disguise? Because these adaptations aren't random quirks. They're the end results of countless generations of trial and error, shaped by climate, competition, and the tiniest tweaks to DNA. Every bulge, blink, flap, and flick has a purpose. We often find ourselves drawn to animals that mirror us in some way. creatures with expressive eyes or graceful movement or social behaviour that feels familiar. But leaning in to appreciate the bizarre and the unexpected deepens our relationship with the natural world. It reminds us that there are as many ways to exist as there are ecosystems on this planet, and that each species, no matter how obscure or peculiar, is a thread in the enormous tapestry of life. It's humbling, really, to know that in the time it takes us to live a life, some creatures have cycled through entire generations, while others, like Ming the clam, have merely blinked. Some animals explode with colour to send a message, while others fade into leaves or sand to survive unseen. Some live fast and bright, like the dazzling blue dragon riding the currents of the sea, while others take it slow, like the gerenuk quietly nibbling from the canopy. And what all of this tells us, quietly and without judgment, is that there is no one way to be alive. There is no singular blueprint for success. There is only variation, expression, and adaptation, endlessly diverse, eternally evolving. When we take the time to understand these animals, not just what they look like, but how they live, what they need, and why they are the way they are, we open a door to empathy, to wonder, and to connection. And perhaps in that small act of curiosity, we begin to see the world not as something separate from us, but as something we are a part of, a shared space full of beauty, brilliance, and yes, some very funny faces. As you drift off tonight, let those faces float through your thoughts, the sleepy gaze of the shoebill, the cautious stretch of the eye's finger, the shimmer of a glass frog's skin beneath moonlight, all of them doing what they do best, being themselves. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most comforting thought of all. Thank you for joining me on this quiet exploration of animal oddities. I hope it brought you not only insight, but a sense of peace, and if you're still awake, hello again. Perhaps this was more interesting than you expected. But that's all right. You've learned something, you've wandered a little, and when you do finally close your eyes, you'll carry with you a bit of the wild and the wonderful. Rest well, curious mind. The world is full of stories, and many of them are hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be seen.